Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. Right now, I'm with Marcus Kellegrew. We're gonna do It's Clobbering Time. We're gonna talk about the best decade of comics, and we'll filibuster a bit to get people to wind in. I watch other people's shows; they literally have like 35 minutes of opening intro stuff. It's like,
Oh,
you know,
I hate the opening intros. I think I'd rather kibitz with you instead of having a huge
yeah,
opening
yeah. So I'd
intro.
rather just BS for.
I can't stand 20 minutes of it. If I'm on the show and they're doing a ton, I just mute it till I start. Like you'll
Yeah,
see me
no.
like a little late. I can't take it. I'm on a couple of shows with long intros, and I'm on too many shows. Three's too many, right?
Well, what's the third show you're on?
I usually show up on the Hump Day show, Omar Glitch,
Oh, okay.
on Wednesday, and that's just a hangout show. We don't do a whole lot. I wasn't on this Wednesday. I was shot. I didn't get home till 8 o'clock, and
I forget. Is Homer Glitch one of the guys that hate me too?
Norman Glitch doesn't hate anybody. I'll have to say that about Omer. Omer doesn't hate anybody, and he's mostly on YouTube. He's not really on Twitter. I mean, he checks his DMs once in a while, but he's not really on Twitter, so he doesn't know what's going on. Like generally, although I don't know as much as I used to, but he likes everybody. He doesn't hate anybody.
Yeah. So Marcus and I would talk. Marcus is drawing one of my comics, the Public Eye, and so we were just going over some secret information.
Information.
So Marcus knows like future plot seeds, just because I think it would be like when J.K. Rowling found out that Snape was cast. Well, what's his name was cast as Snape? I can't remember the actor's name. She told him the whole story of Snape.
Oh, okay. So he would know. I understand why you're telling me.
You know what I mean? So she wanted that to. She wanted him to have an informed choices when he was acting, but he was also sworn to secrecy, like don't tell anybody, which is really cool because Snape was a really interesting character, really complicated character. He had people guessing up until his death. Spoiler: Snape dies. But so Marcus, I just wanted to tell him things just so if you wanted to add.
I love it. It's fine. I really like it.
Yeah, cool. Like I said, I don't normally make coffee this late unless I don't have to work the next day.
I was just looking at this book here, which is a Dave Cockrum Tomorrows.
Oh, cool.
Which I'm like behind on. These are big books to read.
Is that the Futurians?
I'm not get to that part yet. No, I have the Futurians. I have it signed by Dave Cockrum and Patty Cockrum because I sat next to him at a convention one time. But this is a biography of him. And you were talking about how much you hated Herbie the Robot. Well, Dave Cockrum hated Herbie the Robot, and he couldn't design it. And Stanley was like, I'm calling Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby designed it.
Oh, really?
He's like, you're a pain in the ass to work with.
I didn't know
he had a really great time at Marvel till Jim Shooter took over. And he never got in trouble with Shooter. But, yeah, this is the plight of the hippie. I felt bad for all my friends. Right, and they're all hippies. He was a hippie. He grew up in a hippie.
All my friends are me at deadline. We all want to work for Marvel because we don't want a real job.
Well, he was a really sweet. I sat next to him, and he was he was big and heavy at this time, and he was just about out of Marvel, And he was a really nice guy. I mean,
yeah, I like Dave Cockrum.
He was so nice. He didn't even talk about the X-Men. He talked about the Avengers, and that was just when his art was going a little off. Like he couldn't really do superheroes much ananymore.
I remember when he came back to the X-Men after John Byrne.
Yeah, this was after that.
I just remember I was like, this guy's so stiff.
Yeah, he wasn't the same. I didn't get to that part. He wasn't the same.
Because I didn't get the Dave Cockrum X-Men until years later. I started around 119.
Right.
So to me, the X-Men was always John Byrne. And then that was like an abrupt change. And it's funny. Then I find out that he was the guy before John Byrne.
Yeah, he designed most of those costumes.
Yeah, he is one of the best comic book costume designers of all time, if you ask me.
Really enjoyed it. He thinks a little like all us. He thinks just like the rest of us about.
So why did he leave the X-Men? Was he booted or
too slow? It was about going. They want to go monthly, and he was just burnt out. It was bi-monthly, and he had just done the Imperial Guard, and it's his own fault. There was 54 characters to draw, and he couldn't take it, and he took a staff job, and basically what they would call him now the cover editor. So he designed all those covers, which is why he drew so many covers in the mid to late 70s. He would lay the covers out for other people. That's something Ed Hannigan used to do for Shooter in the 80s and at DC. They would have a guys design the cover and send them out to the artists.
Okay.
Yeah, even Kirby's covers, he didn't design. Kirby, I heard, didn't like covers.
Oh, and also keep that in mind. You got the cover for the public.
I know. That makes me nervous.
And I if you ask me for help, I'll give you help. But you read the script. Nobody's going to know better than you.
I'll read it again and again. You know what I started doing the script? You'll find this interesting. My wife, ink is out. Getting ink is a pain in the neck. I started handwriting the script, taking it from the phone and writing the script down on a piece of paper. And I would feel closer to the script that way. Like in longhand. Well, I don't write
whatever works for you,
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. And so I had to read the script again and pick something out and read it again and read it again and read it again.
Renzo says he memorizes the script and then draws from memory.
You know what I like to do? That's interesting. What I like to do is stare at the script and find out what did he exactly mean by that word.
Oh, you could always ask me.
No. It's just a game I play with myself. I know I could ask you. I could DM you. I don't DM anybody, by the way. I'm not.
No, no.
The conversation we had today was as long as I ever do. I just don't bother. I'm driving a lot. I don't bother with it. I'm just not.
Well, I mean, if it was like, dude, I need it in 6 months, I'd be busting balls, But there's really.
I want to get it out. I want to get it done. That was part of the new year to try to get this stuff done. Move on. We can't just be sitting on it.
So I woke up today to a couple of DMs that somebody posted, who would you like to do a collaboration with? And Dave Brink said,
I saw that.
Patriarch. So I was like, let's go. So
I saw that.
I already messaged them with three ideas. We could do this. I said, my only rules, if we do this, I said, it has to be in continuity. I can't stand those.
I know. Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't matter.
I had an idea for you. You don't have to use it. So you have two artists, right? Two writers. You could do a story with Renzo on one side, and then he could do a story with Pow, the other side.
Oh, like I get the right
hand. They could team up. Remember that issue, those comics, a Punisher kind of crossed over with Daredevil, and one was Ann Nocenti and John Romita, and they drew the same fight as Will Partasio and Mike Barron. But it was from the different perspective. One was from the Punisher's perspective, and one was from Daredevil's perspective.
Oh, that's a good idea. And then
you don't have to use it. It's just something.
But he sent me like a 6-paragraph, like off the cuff, an idea, and I was like, that works too.
I mean, I was thinking like, gee, I would like to see Renzo draw it, and then I say no, but I would like to see Pow draw it. Like it's like 6 was 6, 7, right? 6 one half dozen the other.
Is maybe like you said, like my idea, and then I was just like, oh wow, maybe I'll ask RJ. We'll get Tom Valiant, and Thomas Valiant, and then I was like, why stop there? So I put out a tweet. I said,
I saw that tweet in Vaughn.
Crisis on Independent Earths, and I have kind of an idea of why everybody. Again, the only rules would be it has to be in continuity, otherwise it doesn't matter. And then
your continuity, I don't know if they care.
That's just it. I have an idea to make it so that it's every.
Oh, do you? Wow, that's amazing.
So this is the premise that I would think is just like these beings, the D creators, come from wherever, and what they do is they just tweak with a nearby star, and cause them to go to a super black hole, so that not only does it compress gravity, but it compresses reality. So all realities start to converge to the point where we can see all the other realities, all the other characters, and so of course we're gonna fight, and then but that's just about it. I don't even want to put any more thought into it, because if we do accept it, it's not my full project. But
we don't know. You have a lot of projects. If somebody
comes up with a better premise than that, that's a better. And then we figure
another project
back, and you could remember
you don't need another project, John.
Well, that's just it. I'm not saying I would do it, pay for it, or anything like that. But this is what I was thinking is, like, Phoenix Press with the Screecher, or Dave Brink, or Ojo with the Mythicals. Everybody submits like 2 or 3 pages. Like, first off, I don't even begin to write it until we find out who's in it, And then, okay, so you guys are all in it. Okay, we'll brainstorm, come up with an idea. We'll do a rough draft. Everybody goes around, okays it or not, so that everybody gets a writer credit. And then, okay, Renzo, you're doing these 3 pages. You're doing these 3 pages. You're doing these 3 pages. And then we have a full book.
You should ask Paul Thayer.
Yeah. Anybody, I'm putting out a tweet. I'll put out a second tweet. I'll put out a third tweet, and then put it to rest.
Yeah.
But that way, like when I say you give me complete pages, you give me complete pages. So I'm not going to ask you for money. You know what I mean? Like not everybody's just going to, and I'm not going to lay out the money for everything, but like, so so you give me 4 lettered, complete, inked, colored pages. You give me. The only thing that stinks then is if we're waiting for somebody, then they bow out. You just tank the whole project.
Or something happens and they can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have it's just drawing full-time job. It's so piecemeal, and I try to do as much work on the weekends as I can. Yeah. But we'll see. Who's the Mythicals? The Mythicals are by Hojo.
Hojo, I forget his real name. Hojo, he has a superhero team that are basically supernatural. So they're like, Frankenstein's monsters, a witch, werewolves and vampires.
Werewolf, yep.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the BPRD from Hellboy. They're supernatural good guys that solve supernatural mystic problems. What is it? Southside Studios or South River Studios?
South River, Virginia. Yeah. You
could go to southriverstudios.com, check it out. I think the 3rd issue is either delivered or
4th. I think I have all of those issues.
Yeah, so I think 3 issues have come out. It's a good comic. It's an enjoyable comic. I recommend it.
He is a storefront on Fund My Comic, I think, and he's
you can go to Fund My
trade.
When you go to buy Heroic Tales 2, you could also pick up Mythicals. I recommend it. It's a good comic.
It's a good comic, and I agree. I've had it. I've read it. I have those books too.
I just realized I forgot to put the invite here. I was wondering why Tony's not here.
Tony was saying awful things.
Yeah,
about
he's in
rallying. We didn't allow him on there.
So as normal, this is It's Clobbering time. Everybody's welcome. Just turn on your camera if I don't know who you are. Keeps the shenanigans to a minimum. You know what I'm talking about. And anybody, I'll start this. I'll start that. I can't believe I forgot to put the invite. So Master Hobo says, greetings from the homeless shelter, and it's obviously the 80s. Next question. One of the guys at work, I'm dismissing the clobbering time stuff until it's time to do the actual fight. One of the guys at work was watching, so he watched last week's It's Clobbering time.
Was he?
Yeah,
oh,
so
that's cool.
Yeah, he's into comics. And then he got mad because he found out that I have variant editions. He's like, you only sold me issue 1 and 2. You didn't sell me all the variants. I was like, I kind of feel scummy. Oh, you buy my comic? Do you want all of the variant edition? You know what I mean? He goes, I want all the variants. I was like, okay.
That's good for him.
So I was like, there's 5 covers for issue 1. Do you want 4 more covers? And then 2. I was like, that's $70. He's like, bring it on. So
variants in the mainstream is a scam and a grift for both the shops and the companies. But in here, it can bring more people to buy it. Not like if there's a specific artist they want that does that cover or he has his fan base, it can help you out so much. So it's a little different unless you go nuts,
Well, yeah, I kind of went nuts with the first issue because I just got guys that I always wanted to work with.
I know.
But
okay.
I will say that Josh Howard got me sales, his cover. I
bought Josh Howard's one.
Yeah, people who didn't particularly know or care about me, but they like Josh Howard.
Right, that's the point of it.
He said, look, I did a cover for John, and they bought. And then Jose Garcia.
That's right.
He has fans, so his fans bought my stuff too. So there you go. And then
that's it.
The Martina Markova cover got people, that like her. She's got her fan base too.
Though sometimes the older creators don't always bring them in because they're not known by this. They don't really know them anymore. We know them. Me, you, and I know all those guys. They're legends, right? But some of these people going for these comics don't know those guys, and they'll know people like Jose Garcia, who's been in this space for years.
Yeah, I love all the covers. I honestly can't pick
No,
which.
you have good covers. You have a terrific package. You really do.
But I will say this: that Rini asked to do a cover for King Fu and
Oh,
Mary.
good.
So
Excellent.
for Road Tales 3, she said she's all booked right now, and to remind her in May. So in May I will
Okay.
remind her, and I asked her two conditions. I said, give me the price, and that's between me and Rini, and then do it on paper so I could buy it. Buy the actual artwork.
I think she's been doing her pencils in the computer and inking on paper. So
Well, she said she would do it on paper, and I could buy it for her. So,
yeah, no,
but
I know.
I got to remind her in May.
You should see her draw. I watched her draw at Heroes Con. Yeah.
And then when I mentioned that in Twitter, I got people who I can't wait. So to answer, well, it wasn't a question, it was a statement, but I do agree with you. The varied covers, I do feel kind of sleazy making them. True transparency. I feel, but I'm limited. I'm going to limit whoever draws the story draws the cover. That's going to be the main. So for the most part, it's going to be Renzo or you drawing the public eye. You know what I mean? And I already have the variant cover for the public eye made. This guy
I saw that. Yes, I'm not going to say anything about
just
that.
asked me, and I made a small donation to a charity that he liked, and then he just did it. So how can I say no? But and it turned out to be beautiful. I really
nice cover. Yeah, you showed me. It was a beautiful cover.
Yeah. So that's already done. So that's cool. But as I was saying, I'm going to limit it to an A cover and a B cover because Heroic Tales is going to be flip books. So there's already going to be two covers, and then a couple of people just like, man, you should have just made 4 actual comics. But then I feel like I'm ripping people off.
Yeah, but not only that, that's a lot of money for you if you don't get them all back. I mean, I think like streamline. You're streamlining. I feel a little bit more.
I went a little overboard with the first. Thankfully, I sold a lot with the first issue, but
but you having your merch campaign so that you can have your thing is going to be a little more streamlined.
Yeah, because I have 2 campaigns coming up sooner rather than later. I have the Patriarch #1. I hope to launch in a month or so, and then I have a 15-page story, King Fu Blue Christmas. I want to launch that as soon as Renzo has 5 pages and 5 pages colored. I want to put that up so I know how to print, because I wanted the project that is I have a cool story. Everybody likes King Fu, and I want to see if I could get it in people's hands by Christmas. So I want to have the Patriarch. I don't want to talk about my plans yet, but it's going to be a campaign, and then the King Fu. I kind of want to do it stripped down, so maybe no stretch goals, just a 15-page comic. You know what I mean? If you want add-ons, you can get Heroic Tales 1 or 2. It's got to be multiples of 4. So I'll probably it's about rescuing a missing soldier from the Vietnam War. So I'm thinking maybe I'll do a military profile of the squad that everything went crazy. We got Tony here.
You probably have to do a 16-page. I did a 16-page comic. That was the one I published.
So okay, let before we get going, Tony's here. What do you guys think? Is a 16-page comic? Would you guys be interested in a 16?
I published, but I only charged $1.25 for it.
Yeah, but I can't do that.
That was 1997.
I know Heroic Tales was 40 pages for $10, and that was really, really pushing it. So I'm thinking maybe a 16-page comic for $5-7.
I think that's fair. I think 5 or 7 probably better. You'll probably have to do 16 pages because of the 32, the full.
Right. It has to be multiples of 4. It has to be. And I'm not going to have variants or anything like that. It's just going to be. And then next year, I want to do another Christmas story. I have 3 Christmas stories lined up. And then I'm thinking for the 4th year, maybe I'll just do all the Christmas stories in a trade paperback.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that.
But my idea is to keep them inexpensive. I don't like to say cheap, inexpensive, so that when I do the trade paperback and have extra stuff, because it drives me nuts. You buy the Public Eye 1, you buy the Public Eye 2, you buy the Public Eye 3, and then they make a trade paperback, and then they add 17 more pages, and you're like, now I got to spend $30 to get 17 pages. So I want to make it inexpensive, so when I do the 3 stories in one with a couple extra pages, you don't feel like you're getting ripped off, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
So let's just bring ourselves up to the questions, and then we'll start tonight's battle. As you can tell, the coffee just kicked in. So Mythicals, yes, check out Mythicals. We talked about Wayne Desper. That's his name, right? The Josh Howard cover is beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I got it. I got the original art hanging up in my closet. You don't even have to show me any art from Rini. I'm already sold by just the name alone. Yeah, and
so nice.
I told her I want to do like this is totally inspired by Marcus is putting up the romance covers. I want to put up, you know, I want to make it look like a romance cover with King Fu and Mary Sue, because that is something that going forward may or may not happen. I'll leave it at that. And I already know it's going to say Heroic Tales 3, and then it's going to say, like, I want to make it like exploding word balloons. King Fu, Mary Sue, will she love him tender or leave him in Heartbreak Hotel?
Well, I'm glad my romance covers are inspiring.
Yeah, and I hope the twists and turns that I got planned. But I'm falling in love with King Fu. I already did, but I'm falling more in love with them. So the Patriarch #1 is going to be your first book you release this year. Kind of, because I have a 12-page story that's in Punchline, giant size Punchline #1 by Bill Williams, and that's my team. So it's my writing, Renzo's artwork, and Oscar's coloring. It guys, I'm not joking. It is Renzo's best artwork to date, and it's Oscar's best coloring to date. It was a real difficult story for me to write because I was writing for somebody else, so I had their rules to follow, and it had to be 12 pages. I just write until the story's over because it's my book. I can do what I want. You know what I mean? So that was really tough. I kept counting the pages. Did I get everything? Did I get everything? You know what I mean? It's not, and it forced you to. Do I need this panel? Do I need this? You know what I mean? So it forced the story to be economical. That was a lot of fun. That campaign should be launching any day now. So
okay, I'll keep an eye on it.
So that's technically going to be first, and then it'll also be in comic book stores this summer. So the campaign, whenever it launches, and then this summer, probably August, it'll be in stores. So that'll be technically my first, you know. So that's 12 pages published. The Patriarch story is 45 written pages, and then I want to put a letters page, and then I want to put a news article. The Regina Lopez character about the events. That's something that happened in that.
Oh, she's an important character, people. I have inside information.
She's gonna have her own story coming up too. Called "Who is Ian Strange?" That's I was talking to Marcus about that. So this year I have 12 pages definitely coming out already, and then I have Patriarch coming out, which is 40. We'll say 45 pages. And then a 15-page King Fu. So that's 60 plus 12 is 72 pages. My goal is to do 81 pages. Oh God! So now pressure's on.
That's a lot.
Because I did 80 pages last year. But
okay.
Who knows? And then we're gonna go right to work on Heroic Tales 3. It's already written. And then after Heroic,
I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get it done. That's it.
But these have to come out in order. So Patriarch #1 has to come out next. Then and King Fu will come out simultaneously. Then Heroic Tales 3. Then after that, it's whoever finishes their story first gets published in Heroic Tales 4. So that answers a lot of questions. Okay, we filibustered. We got some people here. Tony's waiting patiently with a manila envelope in his hand, and okay.
Oh yeah.
So tonight's topic, it's clobbering time. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, the premise of this weekly show is we're at the comic shop, we're teenagers, and we're just fun arguing, who could win, Batman or Frosty the Snowman and stuff like that. And we just nerd out, it's all in good fun. It's the fun kind of drama. And we kind of ran out of who could win in superheroes versus superheroes. So now we're kind of changing it up a bit. So now the topic is, what is the best decade in comic books? And as normal, we kind of start with Tony. because Tony does the most research.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Well, I have two answers for this.
Okay.
My first answer is, for me personally, 1938 to 1948
Okay.
of the comic book industry. That's the introduction of Superman, the introduction of Batman, Wonder Woman, Captain America, the Human Torch, Namor, all those guys within that 10-year period, I think is for me the greatest decade. But my second answer would be the 90s.
Okay.
Because that's when a lot of normies got on board. That was and a lot of speculators got on board when it blew up, when there were comic book shops on every corner, and unfortunately it caused a bubble that exploded, and it almost killed the industry. But I would say those two, 38 to 48 and 1990 to 2000.
I mean, we have to pay homage to, I'm just going to say the 40s because that's the original. The first comic book came out in what, like 36, 37?
No, the first comic book was All American Comics, and that was 1934. And then the second comic book
was early.
Yeah, and the second comic book was More Fun Comics, All Fun Comics, which was 1936. That was the one that was created by Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson.
But these were also just reprints of newspaper strips.
No. Those two were original strips. The ones that were previous to that were just newspaper reprints, really.
So there were other comic books then before this that were just reprints.
Well, not comic. Do you have in the Overstreet Guide? They mentioned there's a section there, Platinum Age, essentially the Victorian era collections of things like Barney Google and Sparkplug, The Yellow Kid, Thimble Theater. I mean, I guess you could call those the original comic books, though they were just reprints. But
and that was like William Gaines was doing that.
No, Max Gaines. He created the first one, All American Comics. That was the first one that he did in partnership with the Major. Unfortunately, the Major, like I mentioned last time, he got sort of shanghaied by his two lawyers, and they kicked him out of the business, and they sort of took it to the direction of Action Comics and Number One and Batman and Wonder Woman and all that, and they sort of absorbed Max Gaines into the group.
And then, but that became DC. So when did Max turn EC, right? Didn't he find
EC was 1946 or 47 with picture stories from the Bible, and then you had stuff like trying to remember what else he did. His son William Gaines took over around 48, maybe right after his dad died. And he's the one that decided that he was. EC originally stood for Educational Comics.
Right.
And he thought that sucked. So he was like, I'm going to make horror comics. And essentially that was I mean, I love them. A lot of people think that they're terrible and they're cheesy and whatnot. I think I have a omnibus there in the other room of Tales from the Crypt. I love them. Johnny Craig. Help me out here, Marcus. I'm blanking.
Johnny Craig, Graham Ingalls.
Thank you.
Jack Davis, John Severin, Will Elder, Harvey Kurtzman. They did the war books and the horror books. They're known to be the best war books, mostly, and the best horror books ever done. And they were so rough, particularly the horror books, just really got the Wortham people and got them before Congress. And Gaines did not do well before Congress.
No.
He really choked. And then the rest of the comic industry got so nervous that Congress was going to come and shut them down. The Congress did not say you have to have a comics code. They put it in themselves. They did. It was their thing, and and every book would have to go to a committee, and the companies were in a committee, and like the main people that were in a committee were the Archie Comics. So this was like really purebred. Like you know, you if things that you think that like Jack Kirby drew the skull, Red Skull, really scary in the 40s. Well, the Red Skull didn't look so scary in the 60s. Why? Comics Code. They shot down a lot more stuff than anybody ever thought.
Backtracking, who Archie Comics, the guys at Archie Comics were the big,
Richard Goldwater. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Archie was local to Mamaroneck, New York. Now they're in Pelham, I think.
And it's funny because poor William Gaines was going to get arrested. They had to smuggle his ass out of his building as soon as they saw that the cops were coming. Yeah, Wortham really screwed a lot of people.
And that's why Mad Magazine became Mad Magazine instead of Mad Comic Book, because they were afraid that there was no way they were going to get away with what they were doing without an over-the-top, like, violence. You know, that was just jokey and sexy stuff. So they moved that to a magazine format. And you really look at Mad, a lot of the violence, the same thing that Will Eisner was doing in the 40s. You know, like you would see like the instead of just taking one punch, the Spirit would take 5 like this, you know. So it's kind of ironic. And then you go back to the comic strips, you read Dick Tracy or any of these strips, you're like, wow, that's really violent, or that's really, really racy, way racier than I thought.
Speaking of Dick Tracy,
this only things were cleaned up till the 50s.
This speaking of Dick Tracy, I got this because of you, Marcus. Always talking about Dick Tracy. I felt like, how can I have a comic book channel and I never read any of the original Dick Tracy?
Dick Tracy was really good. I mean, the art's a little crude, but it was really good. I read a lot of it in school. Like, it all comes back to me. I don't have anything right now.
Yeah. So this is volume 1. I always got to start at the beginning. I ordered it from Amazon. It took like 4 months to show up.
Really? Wow.
What's going on with Amazon? They used to be overnight.
Some stuff is.
Yeah.
If it's done from Amazon, it's overnight. But if it's from an outside seller, it could take.
It's from an outside seller, but you know.
Yeah.
But so when we already got distracted, but this is the kind of stuff I love talking about. So when EC, so let's backtrack a little bit. We kind of forget Hollywood came under attack, and the government actually censored Hollywood, and every time they had movies, basically there was somebody from the government there and comic books didn't want that. So comic books kind of beat them at the punch and censored themselves.
The Board of Decency started in movies in 1934.
Right.
And so, yeah, they wanted a self-regulating government body. And that's what they did. But unfortunately, DC took the worst of it. That's when, like I said, Batman went from fighting gangsters in his rogues gallery to fighting space aliens. He got a dog with a little mask on.
Yeah, Ace the Bat Hound, sure.
And that was the beginning of the original Batwoman and Batgirl, because one of the things that Wortham said was that Batman and Robin were homosexuals.
That's right.
Because
little did he know.
Yeah, well, now.
Well, I wouldn't know it now. I mean,
so Tony, I was joking the other day that I said, you were there for a comic book team up with RJ that I was daydreaming. Marcus, how would you like your next project to be the Fruit Bat? I figure since they're dying to make Batman gay, let's beat them at the punch. And we'll make
Bat, I'll do it. I don't care.
They'll be swinging. They'll swing through San Francisco on a rainbow rope.
So anyways, he that was one of his main issues. So that was the creation of Batwoman and Batgirl, the original Kathy Kane, which was later redone by Dan DiDio in the New 52. And that was also when Batman became more of a, I don't know, that's when he got the dog. That's when Batmite showed up. That's when the thing just started to suck. Batman lost its edge in 1949. Marcus, you would know, when was Seduction of the Innocent published?
I have to look. I actually have to look it up. Hold on.
Yeah. Well, that's Batman started to suck right around that time, and it stopped sucking around 1966 with the show. The show, as much as people hate the show, I love it.
I love the show.
People hate the show. That's when Batman got his rogues gallery back. That's when he became Batman again, and he stopped.
1954.
1954. There you go.
And one of the things, I'll get to that super chat in a second. One of the things that always bothered me about Seduction of the Innocent. Oh, and if anybody could find a first printing cheap, point it my direction. The only one I've ever seen is like $400. I don't want to spend.
You can find it on Project Gutenberg for free.
Yeah, but I want a copy. I want a copy in my house.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I want a physical copy of the book, but I'm not paying $400 for it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and it's got to be a first printing. He one of his points was juvenile delinquents always read comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? That's like saying every child molester drinks water. Well, everybody drinks water. You know what I mean? That's not a good point, because back then, all kids read comic books. You know, the church-going kids read comic books. This before Child Seduction of the Innocent, every kid read comic books. After, you know.
Well, what was funny about Wortham was he was an idiot. Well, anyone can see. But the other thing that was funny is he saw things that he was inventing himself, like with the homosexual thing with Batman, that Superman was a fascist because he tied him up with the Ubermensch, with Friedrich Nietzsche and all that. But he didn't criticize Wonder Woman. You know, Wonder Woman was a fetish comic. He completely ignored her. He went to the Phantom Lady and the other ones. But it's like he was stupid about not really seeing. I mean, he would look at like this glass of water here, and he'd be like, this glass of water represents blah 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 blah, and all glasses of water are evil.
Cigar, you know.
Yeah, but he was a moron. Did you ever see his interview that he had with Al Cap? Al Cap completely ripped him up one side and down the other.
Al Cap was
beautiful to see.
He was based.
What's that?
He was based.
Yeah, Al Cap,
real conservative.
Yeah, he's great. I love Al Cap. You know, it's fun to watch him interview anybody. This is a guy who just doesn't give a crap. You know, he just cuts right to the quick. He's a very interesting.
John Lennon.
I saw that. Yep. He tore them a new one. He tore Lennon. He tore Lennon and what's her face a new one.
Yet another one that was Me Too'd after he died. And unfortunately, after that happened, Little Abner got swept under the rug. I don't think anybody knows who that character is. What a shame. Wonderful script.
I got a RRTNZ, $10 New Zealand. I think there's too big a question to cover all comic companies. DC had a resurgence in the late 80s, but Marvel owned the 70s and 80s. Looking at Marvel alone, I'd say 75 to 85 was the kick. Yeah. This is all in good fun. This is just so we can talk about comics.
I was thinking that you were saying about like everybody read comics, but one of the biggest things in World War II was that the troops read comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So when they came home, they wanted to read comic books. And so that's why the comics certain comics like the EC comics got more violent. Older people were reading it. It was not just kids. You know, there were the superheroes. Some of them were for kids and some of them for adults. Now it wasn't going to be like manga. Oh, there's a golf comic. Well, that wasn't happening. But they did have sports comics too, about the sports stars, about Mickey Mantle and all that. And there was a little bit of comics for everybody. And they weren't dumbed down. I mean, some of them were, but not all of them. There were so many comic publishers that if you wanted to write a comic, you wouldn't have to crowdfund. You'd have to walk down to the corner in New York City. You know, St. John's is over here, and DC's over there, and some other comic companies, and Will Eisner's over here, and they all were hiring. And so there were all sorts of different comics. And, you know, once Wortham was done, it was DC Comics. It collapsed the whole industry, you know.
And this was going on simultaneously with the Army hearings with Joe McCarthy. Now, Joe was right. Joe was right. And as time goes on, people realize how right Joe was. This, however, was done by a senator by the name of Estes or Eustace Kefauver. And that was a hick. He was a rube that believed in all this crap, and he thought that he could use this and ride its coattails to the White House. Unfortunately, all he did was just almost destroy an industry, an American industry.
And comics really haven't really recovered. Although somebody said in the chat that it ruined comics. It did ruin comics, but it kind of helped comics too because they had to get around the comics code. Some of the comics became more creative than they were supposed to be. Like what did Julius Schwartz and Gardner Fox we talked about last week? How are they going to get around that? They can't do violent fights like they did in the 40s. Well, they became very scientific and Flash thought his way through his comics, and so did Green Lantern to a certain extent.
And oddly enough, John, are you familiar? Are either of you familiar with a school of thought called the Frankfurt School?
The Frankfurt.
It's where a lot of the modern indoctrination, leftist indoctrination that infested the universities, right?
Oh, no, I think I have heard of that.
I thought this was a comic book school of art. That I'm ready to be embarrassed. Is something that important that I don't know about?
Wortham came from the Frankfurt School. That's why he was so bent the way he was. It's an interesting book to read. Like I said, if you want to ever, go on Project Gutenberg, it's fun to read because it's so badly written. The theories have no merit on anything scientific. It's just hearsay,
It's like
It's funny. I can't believe I've come full circle, but like, I remember making fun of Tom Cruise. Did you know the history of psychology? I know the history of psychiatry. And now I'm like, they're all a bunch of frauds. Like I think Sigmund Freud should change his name to Sigmund Fraud.
You should look up Alfred Kinsey, the
sex
what
a the sex guy,
a very big creep, and he was a friend of Wortham. The two of them actually studied together at university. So
these early psychologists, they're all a bunch of creeps, and I've been doing a lot of research on alchemy and magic, for my comic and stuff. And a lot of these early psychologist guys were interested in alchemy and everything, and they just based their early psychology on like astronomy and astrology and pseudoscience.
The worst of that one was what was his name? The guy that talked about the shadow self and the id. What the hell was his name? Well, it'll come to me, but he was the one that was more rooted into the occult angle of that. Trying to remember his name. The guy. It'll come to me. Forgive me. I had a brain fart there, but go ahead.
But so like, I was watching a YouTube chat where a guy was interviewing psychiatrists and psychologists, and first question, where'd you study? What's your method? Blah, blah, blah. And then the third question was, how many people have you cured? And they all just laughed nervously. And out of all 12 of these people, only one of them said, I cured one person. Can you imagine that track record? Like, can you imagine if like, hey, John, how many houses did you wire up? Well, I wired up 12, but only one didn't burn down. You wouldn't hire, I don't know. I hope my friend, the psychiatrist, isn't seeing this because she's the most crazy person I know.
Well, John, that's the medical profession in a nutshell, isn't it? You think that there's not a cure for cancer? There probably is, but it costs more money.
I say this: if there was a cure for cancer, then Steve Jobs wouldn't have died. I mean, they all say they're saving it for the billionaire elite. If Steve Jobs died of cancer,
that's a good. There's
no cure for cancer.
I'm just saying that it's more lucrative to have a lifetime customer. So if you go into a psychologist, you have depression, you have all this stuff. Right. Instead of helping you get to the root of it and finding a way to live with it, it's, well, here's some drugs. Here's some drugs. I'll see you next week. Here's some drugs.
I'm a construction worker. I bring this up people like rolling their eyes whenever I say that. Marcus could back me up. We got strenuous jobs. Every once in a while, my back hurts. And for the longest time, I didn't want to do it. But one time, about 20 years ago, I was in so much pain, I went to a chiropractor. My girlfriend at the time was just like, I'm tired of seeing you like this. She was like, please just go. And oh my God, she said she heard the back being cracked from the waiting room. It was so freaking loud. It was like a miracle. First thing the guy said, come 3 more times a week. Blah, blah. I never went back. I didn't go back for years. So I go to the chiropractor when I can't take the pain anymore. And I know it's not a cure. It's just pain management. And I also know like the spine moves. All they're doing is resetting it. And it's a temporary.
My father going to a lot of not Naomi does not.
Yeah, but
We went to a lot of chiropractors, and it
Right.
was kind of about lining you back up.
right, and it
You
worked
know.
for what it worked. But they all say the same thing 3 times a week, blah 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 blah. And I go, no. You know, to the chiropractor I got now, he just laughs. He goes, oh, it's my stubborn patients here. I was like, yeah, when I need you to do it, like I don't take aspirin when I don't have a headache. I'm not going to the chiropractor. But that's how I feel about, they make more money if I go 3 times. I don't need it. I feel the same thing. Like if I was a psychiatrist, I'd be the worst psychiatrist in the world. I understand there's people with schizophrenia and legit, chemical and organic problems with their brain. I'm talking about the people who just like, I'm like, go for a walk, go to the park, get up, stop playing video games, get out of your house.
I never played. I was so bad at video games.
But you know what I mean? Just get up. That's why you're depressed. You don't see value in life because you're not experiencing life.
I just remembered the name Carl Jung.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said Young. Yeah, he was one of them that was based his stuff on occult and stuff.
Yes.
So anyway, I meandered, but I hope people find this interesting. I
Well,
totally
it does kind of like have a little to do with what we're talking about.
I totally derailed Wiggle on Outer Pangea. I was watching him last night, and it was Comicsgate drama, and I love Wiggle. I love Floyd Rap the Jesus, all those guys, but I'm real tired of even making fun of that stuff. So I turned it on, and I'm like, and then also they started talking about board game miniatures. I was like, I'm on, and we talked for like an hour about board game miniatures. So I totally derailed this show. But anyway, I like that's the kind of stuff. Everyone should go to a chiropractor at least once. Not only go if you need it. It's like saying take ibuprofen once a year. Just take it if you need it. Don't take it if you don't do it if you don't need to go. But yeah, I recommend. I go to get a pedicure every once in a while because wearing those work boots and carrying pipes and stuff like that and moving cinder blocks around, your feet take a beating.
They take a real beating, yeah.
Yeah, Marcus, have you?
I don't work that hard anymore. I drive a lot. I don't work hard.
Yeah, but
once in a while.
In your hardest working days, did you ever go get a pedicure?
I never did. No, my feet are a mess.
Yeah, you gotta. I
My feet
recommend.
are killing me all the time.
You gotta.
But I lost some weight, so they don't kill
Yes.
me as much as they used to.
So anyway, back to Wortham. I'm suspicious of all psychiatrists, psychologists, whatever this guy calls them. It to me, it's more of like it's an art rather than a science. Like no two psychologists agree on how to cure anything. So and Wortham, I think, was just the worst of the worst. Now back to what they said. He did ruin comics for a generation in the fact that a lot of talent was scared to work in comics and left. A lot of people were ashamed of it, and that was, to me, one of the roots that Stan Lee changed his name, from Stanley Lieber to Stan Lee because he was embarrassed by comics.
Mm-hmm.
I think it wasn't until late in his life that he realized comics weren't a bad thing. He was always a little embarrassed, if you ask me, that he wanted to write the great American novel. That's why him and Jack Kirby were so ecstatic when they had that Simon and Schuster deal. It kind of legitimized it. But at the same time, contradictory, I agree with Marcus. I do think the Comics Code Authority helped it a little bit in that and I can't believe I'm admitting this because up until my 20s, I was like, it's just censorship. But I do think that guidelines and rules, it makes for more creativity, paradoxically. And the example that I always give is, when your teacher said, okay, you have an essay due on Friday on, what I want for Christmas or whatever, you do it. But when the teacher says whatever you want, you spend 4 days not doing anything because, sometimes infinite choices gives you infinite paralysis. But I think when you have guidelines, it works best. Like Renzo, my artist, he wants super detailed scripts. And I understand why he wants it, because he doesn't want to waste his time doing redrawings. He wants to do it once and then do another page because then he gets paid again. You know what I mean? He has a page rate. So, but also I think he just likes it because he's a pro and he wants the client, me, to be happy, or RJ or anybody, who else, Aaron Sparrow, all these guys that he's working with. And he says he likes it. Some guys one of the artists I'm working with, he basically just wanted like an index card of my story ideas, and that's what he, you know, I don't know how that's going to turn out, but it's kind of a fun experiment, you know. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the Comics Code Authority helped or hindered, or a little bit of both?
You can't create art in a box. That's the reason why Hollywood sucks now. That's the reason why Star Wars and all that is bad, because you have to have one of these here and you have to have one of that here and you have to push this agenda or that. But I think what they were doing was keeping the government out of their business.
Right.
And I think in that way they succeeded. But again, one of the reasons I like the Golden Age so much, and I know this is I might be veering a little off topic.
That's
but
fine. That's fine. I like these little tangents.
I love the moral binaryism of it. I love how shocking it is, how violent, how grotesque, how unpolitically correct it is. And then you look at that, the Golden Age, and then you go to the 50s and early to mid 60s DC, and everyone's happy and everything's smiling, and it's very boring. That's why Marvel owned the Silver Age. Marvel owned it. They were the kings of it because they weren't afraid to be edgy. They weren't afraid to go there. Whereas, DC was really afraid. Like I don't want to be mean. Like Robert Kanigher and Joe Kuber's war books were perfect. John Broome and Carmine Infantino's Flash is probably, in my opinion, the best Silver Age superhero thing DC published. But the majority of DC in the Silver Age sucked until around 66. That's when you started to see they were trying to catch up to where Marvel was.
Master Hobo, how old are you anyway? You weren't even born during the Golden Age. He's an old soul. Tony's an old soul. What do you want me to say?
I discovered the Golden Age. I discovered it on accident because my father was a comic book nerd and my mother was a comic book nerd, and they collected stuff, and it was so rare to find. It was like postcards from Oz. You could find Silver Age reprints everywhere. You could find Bronze Age and at the time Modern Age, 80s and 90s comics everywhere. But the Golden Age stuff, you had to look.
It was harder to find.
It did not come easy.
The only way you could see them is in that book Smithsonian, which Bingo. I have that book. Bingo. And then in the 70s, the DC used to do the 100-page super spectaculars, and then they would have Golden Age stories.
So I mean, I was shocked by how raw everything was. And I've heard people say, oh, it sucks, it's boring, it's repetitive, the art sucks. I'm sorry. For me, I love it.
Some of the art's really good. And some of the artists, they were all artists who nobody wanted to be a comic artist. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be illustrator like Rockwell and Leyendecker at the time, and like Flagg and all those guys. And they didn't make it. And they got comic work. And there's one guy, Everett Kinsler. Did you ever hear of Everett Kinsler?
Yes, I did. Yes.
He ended up painting the portraits of 7 presidents up till Reagan. Mm-hmm. And so there were really some really great artists who cut their teeth in comics. And there's only a few guys who wanted to stay in comics. And they were the names that we all know. Will Eisner, Jack Kirby, Joe Simon, who stayed in comics for years until the 60s. Gardner Fox, Joe Kubert at 13 years old, coloring Will Eisner. These are the guys who really wanted to stay. But there weren't that many guys who wanted to stay in comics. In the 50s, they talk about in the 70s that they were fans turned pros. And that was like Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson. Mm-hmm. But there were plenty of people who were fans of comic strips, like, Dick Ayers or John Romita, who came in to do comics because strips were even harder to get into. And they started they started drawing all sorts of other things. The sad part about comics is that we don't have the depth of different comics. Like we do in the indie space, you can do whatever comic you want. But since the last 30, 40, 50 years, Western, horror, there's none of that stuff that carried the comics, even when the superheroes of the 50s and 60s. Romance. I don't know if we need to have romance comics. They got pretty bad, but same thing.
I always like that. I like the pulps, stuff like Edgar Rice Burroughs. It makes me sound like an old fuddy-duddy, you know, but I appreciate the past in terms of, you know, literary and popular culture than I did I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. I grew up around the grim and gritty era. You know,
I was a little before.
Yeah, the first Batman. I mean, the Batman that I grew up with was the first Batman that I knew was Adam West. The Batman that I grew up with was the Frank Miller Batman. I grew up around the darkness of that, and I never liked it. It never agreed with me. It's just that's why if you
I don't
if you
100% disagree with you about that. I grew up mainly in the 70s and ended up going to college in the 80s.
Mhm.
And the Batman of the 70s, of course, you got your Super Friends. You know, that's even closer to this Batman 66. And that was be rerun all the time. Superman from the 50s, rerun not on Nickelodeon. We're talking like on local TV, after school, before school. The Super Friends Batman. And the Super Friends Batman was kind of in the comics. I mean, they had Neil Adams and the darkish, but he was still an adventurer. He still was a superhero. He wasn't violent. He was grim, but he wasn't gritty. You know, like he was a serious, like, why did you leave the Spider-Man after that? These are not bad comics. I know that, like Chuck says, oh, the 70s comics are bad. But he's talking about Black Panther and Don McGregor, Doug Mensch, who wrote like books, or Steve Gerber. Like, people love Steve Gerber's comics. I don't put it up, but he wrote a lot. There's a lot of copy in those comics, and they're very psychological.
Steve Gerber needed an editor, because if you let Steve,
he was so late they couldn't. Yeah, I'm reading a blog.
Give him a free hand. He went off the rails.
And they love Gerber, and I'm like, he was all right, you know. But I go in from those comics, and they weren't dark. They were just getting a little more out there. Because the people were doing drugs and all that, Starlin and Englehart and all that. They all needed editors.
I'm talking about the Batman that was as dark as the criminals he was bringing in. You know,
that's after pretty much after, you know, the 90s, like after
Batman,
Dark Knight. I mean, I know exactly when that happened.
But anyways, I mean, that's why I just, if you look at my comic book collection, the stuff I have from the 80s, it's just very selective. It's stuff like Cerebus, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Airboy, Alien Legion. Got a lot of Epics Illustrated, but I don't have a lot of DC. I don't have a lot of Marvel there.
But
it just wasn't really my thing.
Books. I mean, there were still books, DC and Marvel. I mean, they had a lot of, like, Alan Moore's. The bulk of his thing was in the 80s, like for Swamp Thing, Howard Chaykin, Walt Simonson's Thor, because in the end of Byrne's X-Men, you know,
and you're right.
And then a continuation of the X-Men with Cockrum and Paul Smith and John Romita and all that. They were really actually pretty good. The 80s are probably the big, other than the 60s and Marvel, but both companies, a big explosion, because DC did create the packaging of the square-bound comic with Dark and Ronin, which is kind of underrated at this point. So there was a lot of things
going on in the
80s.
I thought
Ronin's good. Ronin's really good. Yeah.
I love that ending. Oh man, it took me by surprise. I don't want to spoil it. I know it's like a 60.
Right, and not everybody's read it anymore. And you know, Daredevil, but Daredevil, all that stuff, that's a late 70s into the early 80s. That wasn't Marvel, really, like they were saying in the chat. Marvel owned like the late 70s to the early 80s, to 83 or 84, and after Secret Wars, pretty much then DC took over. You know,
Simonson's Thor is a classic. I love it. But for me, when I think of Walt Simonson, I think of the Manhunter. Does anybody?
I read the Manhunter. I have a collection of that too.
This Dr. Fate stories from the 70s. I thought that was like, his Thor was epic. I love it, but again, it was a great run, but then it sort of turned into the Eric Masterson Thunderstrike show.
Well, that's a different. Well, as soon as he was done, they went right to Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz. Yeah, they didn't even try.
Yeah.
It's really kind of finite. You know, that's true. Oh, that's getting, you know, that run too with Ron Frenz. That's getting like love too, because comics are so bad. People are going back to nostalgia for that run, or Tom DeFalco's Fantastic Four, like John had Tom DeFalco on, and you're going back and saying, well, this Fantastic Four. At the time, you're like, oh my god, this is awful. This is really bad because comics now don't have anything
It's
like
really
that.
funny that for some reason that Tom DeFalco, Paul Ryan, Fantastic Four, I was like, I'm quitting.
I felt the same way.
And then I reread the entire run, and I bought a couple of issues that I had missed, and I read it all in preparation for Tom DeFalco to come on my, and I freaking loved it. It was nonstop action. They said that comics had the A plot, B plot, C plot at the time. There was like a U plot, just nonstop. I remember them being like, oh, they're being disrespectful to Reed Richards, but on retrospect, they didn't. Like, Reed Richards disappeared. The editorial decided they wanted to get rid of Reed Richards. He was too boring or whatever, and they got rid of him. Fine. Even at the time, I was like, this isn't going to last. It's just, the comic books always do that. They throw you for a loop and then they reinvent the status quo. But when they brought him back, he was kind of like mopey and everything like that. And at the time, I was like, that's Reed Richards. He should have just jumped back and took over and been the coolest guy in the world. But they kind of gave him PTSD, like he was out in an alien world, abandoned by everybody. That affects you,
I felt the same way.
I thought it was more mature than I gave it credit for, and I liked it a lot better.
I always got for the artwork.
In my memory, I remembered Sue Storm cheating on Reed Richards, but when I reread it, she was the only one who never gave up on him, and Namor was hitting on her, and she was refusing Namor's event. It's funny how memory works. That I remembered the story wrong. So I apologized to Tom DeFalco, and he looked at me.
I remember that. That was funny.
He was just like, yeah, I didn't like your run. I was like, bad-mouthed it. And now I read it. It's freaking awesome.
Well, I like the art a lot, so I kept getting the book.
Yeah, to me,
I felt somewhat the same way.
That's one of the reasons why I go with Renzo. Renzo has that John Byrne, George Perez, Paul Ryan look to him.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tony.
So my main problem with the 80s is the deconstruction. I understand that things have to change in order to continue to exist, but I don't believe a lot of the deconstruction that happened, some of it was homegrown, like from Frank Miller and Howard Chaykin, but the majority of it came over with the British invasion. And there's just something odd about that country. They don't believe in heroes too much. I mean, instead of
look at that. Who's their biggest superhero?
Well, in the 50s, it was
their biggest superhero is a fascist cop.
Well, in the 50s, they had a character called Dan Dare, which was essentially a ripoff of Flash Gordon. But yeah, it soon became overshadowed by Judge Dredd. But I'm saying these people came in and they were placed into situations that they shouldn't have been placed into. I mean, I understand reinvention, right? But I'll give you an example. Pete Milligan on Shade the Changing Man. What the hell was that? I still don't understand it. None of that made any sense. I'll give you another one. I love what Alan Moore did with the Swamp Thing, but essentially what he did was he just took the character, hollowed it out, and stuck a new character in there and sewed the back of it up. That is not the character that Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson created. That is not the character that was essentially stolen by Theodore Sturgeon from Theodore Sturgeon. The Swamp Monster. This was a god. This was an elemental, and this was talking about all sorts of weird stuff.
Just to pique interest, I can't wait to introduce my swamp creature character.
But so I mean, I understand why it had to happen. I understand why they did it, but that, I mean, to finally bring it back to answer in my own long-winded way, that is the reason why I like old comics. And I'm talking old comics.
Okay, I'm going to focus this conversation now. So now we're just going to go decade by decade.
Okay.
So we'll start at the Golden Age. What are the tropes? What are the characteristics of we'll say, I mean, the 30s is only a couple of years. So we'll say, up to 1949. What do you think? So we'll say the 40s, meaning the 30s and 40s, because the 30s really. So what do you think are the defining characteristics of comics in the 40s?
Good versus evil.
Yep.
Good versus evil. That was it. Right versus wrong. Moral binaries.
Yeah. Good versus evil. Heroes. Unrestrained masculinity.
Patriotism.
Patriotism, and we're fighting a war.
Mhm.
You know. If any man, children are being abused here, MPS can help. The Man Child Protective Service. Feel free to put your phone number in there because I got a feeling you're going to need somebody's going to. If you need help, blink.
To expand on the Golden Age, the heroes when they got their powers were heroes. They didn't need a reason, and like Spider-Man could, Uncle Ben got killed, he was selfish, or Batman. Batman did have a reason, but most of them, it's like there's something online with somebody. So what was Superman's reason for being such good? Because he was Superman,
right?
And Dr. Fate got the powers, and he was a good guy because he was Dr. Fate. That's just there was no Captain America. There's no question. They were just good people. We all wish that if we got superpowers, we'd use them for good. We don't know if we would, right? But we want to, and that's what the 40s did. And there was obvious evil in the world that they could name. They're making that up. They're using that word for no reason now. But back then, it was evil. I mean, it was true. So that's what I think that the 40s. And then the artwork it's not great. It's not it's exciting. It's new. These guys are learning how to do it. They were using circles. They were, especially Kirby, even after Kirby started, they were throwing characters across the page. Anything went. There wasn't a lot of close-ups. There was a lot of
I'll say,
but still the roughness of it.
Stereotype to say stereotype to say the art was bad because there was some truly great artwork, but
it's not. But it wasn't really bad. There's some that are really bad, but when you look at it, it's not quality. Okay, this deltoid is drawn like we all have to draw the fingers exact.
It wasn't that
something raw and exciting. Right. About the art. It was recreated later again, raw and exciting about Captain America, about Superman, the squinty. Like, there's not much background, but there's something about that Superman. Even the Bob Kane Batman when he first, because of Batman, the style, and he had other people drawing it for him, so there's that. But it didn't have to be perfect. It was just there. It's just.
Would you say like a good one word is like idealism?
Yeah, I think that's a good one word. Yeah.
Okay. You see, when it created a monomyth, a modern myth. These are our Hercules. These are our Achilles.
Right.
These are our Gilgameshes. And with time, because they're corporate owned, the story doesn't end because it can't end because an IP that is not exploited loses money. So because of that, you have people working on these things that shouldn't be working on them. And then they deconstruct them and they look at them from a different way. And sometimes it's good. Most times it isn't. I'm kind of a fuddy-duddy on that. I mean, if you're going to write Captain Kirk, I want you to write Captain Kirk the right way, the way Gene Roddenberry created him, and not make him into a bisexual POC, weirdo that wears a tutu on the bridge. And, you're not going to, that's wrong. That's the wrong way to do these things.
The costumes, they had capes. Unironically had capes because people had capes. People wore capes. They wore capes in plays. They had masks. They had underwear outside the ring because that's what the circus strongmen wore. Had those big drawers. That's how they created it. It's why the patriarch has a cape, but what color he is, whatever it is, it was decided then. It was all new.
I heard that people in certain circumstances did wear capes up until Mussolini. Like Mussolini killed the cape.
He killed the cape. Well, yeah. Well, he was like, yeah. People did wear capes. That's true. My mother had a cape.
Yeah.
Like in the winter, she wore a cape. You go to some
capes, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. We're taking back capes. So I do. The Golden Age to me was exciting because they were creating a whole new medium. These people didn't have blueprints. They didn't have anything that they could look at and copy. They were making it up as they went along. There's a lot of bad comics in the 70s, but there's also in the 70s too, in the 40s. But there was also a lot of great comics, and just the fact that we're still reading these characters today just shows you how great it was. You know, so I'm a big fan of the Golden Age because a lot of it was I don't want to say grim and gritty because that defined like the 80s later on, but it was grim and gritty in the fact that they weren't afraid to have, like, the original Batman had a gun. You know, Superman was literally picking up people and throwing them across the city in jail cells and stuff like that. Superman was just like punching wife beaters. Oh, you want to beat your wife? Crack. You know what I mean?
The main
He
thing
wasn't as
about
powerful either, though, to be fair.
Yeah, but no.
the people that were working on it were enthusiastic. They liked doing it. Like Siegel and Schuster were geeks. They were nerds. They created the ultimate wish fulfillment character. They created a golem, essentially.
Right.
A golem that could fly and wore a red and blue costume. I mean, that's, you could tell that these people, some of them were slumming it, or they thought they were slumming it, like Patricia Highsmith when she was writing The Black Terror, and Bob Kane, who was like, you know, he liked the concept of the work, but he didn't actually like to do the work himself. But
yeah, kind of like JDA.
Yeah, most of them, though,
That's pretty good.
a lot of enthusiasm for the role. I mean, Stan Lee,
Tony, I got to interrupt you for a second. Could you imagine if Bob Kane had access to AI?
Oh my God.
He would have been the happiest guy in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You're
that,
happy anyway.
yeah, that's you know what I mean. Oh, I want all the credit. I want all this stuff, and but I don't want to put in any effort. I just want the reward. Yeah. Sorry, but I had to get that.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. AI was made for Bob Kane.
Yeah.
It was made for him. But yeah, so anyways, and that's a reason why I think that, again, Marvel ruled the Silver Age, because
We didn't get to the Silver Age yet. We'll still finishing up thoughts on the Golden Age. So, any closing thoughts on the 40s?
No, it's just again, I understand that it's not for everyone, but if there's anybody out there who I would recommend, just brush up on your Golden Age stuff. The stories are pretty damn good.
Yeah, if you find a garage sale, there's some Golden Age comics. I mean, first off, they're probably worth a good penny or so, but second off, they're surprisingly good. The good ones, I just realized I'm going to say something. The good ones are good. The bad ones are bad. Like, that's something like a child would say.
Yeah, but that's
the highs of the Golden Age are really, really good. You know, and just like every age, most of the comics are Drek. But there are some really good Golden Age stuff.
But here, if I may end it, here's where it's a little sad, because of the comic book market. People don't want to reprint any of it because, well, the reason DC won't reprint a lot of it is because DC is very politically correct. So that's why we won't get any Captain Marvel stuff. We won't get any Slam Bradley stuff from Detective Comics, because it's racist. And the people that own these comics refuse to actually scan them or take pictures of them, try to save them for posterity, for future generations, because the people that own these things see them as an investment,
right,
rather than a piece of popular culture.
I have a copy of Millie the Model #1 from 1940. I don't know where I bought it. And it's in remarkable condition, considering it's also my oldest comic. And I did a video on it. And if you look at the video, there's a guy saying, he basically wanted me to mail it to him so he could scan it for some comic book. And I'm like, no way am I mailing you this comic. And he goes, I understand. So he gave me directions on how to scan it and send him the scans, which made me think he's legit. But I haven't done it.
Well, it's a shame, because we're going to lose a lot of it. Just like with pulps. We're going to lose a lot of the pulps, because
a lot of those silver nitrate early Hollywood films.
Exactly.
There's Hollywood movies that won Oscars that we don't know anything about.
Exactly. So that's the sad part about the Golden Age. No one's going to be able to really. A lot of it's going to be lost because of the avarice of the collector market. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Lords of Brooklyn says, I've been reading The Spirit. I can see why Eisner gets the praise he does. He improves every. Yes, I will say that in my Mount Rushmore of comic book people, Will Eisner is one of the first. Like, I put William Gaines in there because he's, I put Max and William because together they kind of created comic books, and then so they earn a spot. But Will Eisner, to me, is the first person who elevated the medium. He saw the potential and said, "I want to make this more than And I hate to say the direct that was coming out, but he recognized
He never shut up.
that this, look at the original people who I guarantee you the first films that were made were probably like porn, naked girls, or you know what I mean, like. You know what I mean? And then somebody decided we can make movies, we can make Shakespeare, we can make art. You know what I mean? And then later on, and now we got film schools and great art and wonderful film. But like Will Eisner was the first one that said, "This is this crap that we throw at kids. This could be a legitimate art form in itself." So yeah, I give Eisner all the credit that and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. Tony,
let's do that next week. Who would you put? Each of us would put the Mount Rushmore of comic book people. And I already have.
I'll stop talking that because then I'll give it all away. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to
studied with some of them. So,
Tony, Marcus, anything you want to say about the 40s before we go to the 50s?
I think I just echo what you guys say. I'm not, I didn't disagree with any of that. I think the art is better than people think, especially on certain strips like Hawkman is particularly good. The one thing that they did take is they did take their influence from Alex Raymond and Milt Kinniff in the comic strips. And so that's why you get different styles there. And they're learning their different styles. It's just kind of raw and exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the 50s now. Tony, you want to start us with the 50s?
I'm sorry, I didn't pick that up. Can you say it again?
You want to start us with the 50s now? We're going to go decade.
I don't know what to call the 50s, but I'm going to say
we're going by decade, so the 50s.
Okay, the 50s. Okay, so in the 50s we had EC. EC ruled the comics, the newsstand shelves for the early 50s. EC Comics, what can I say, man? What can I say? I mean, they're legendary. They're legendary for pushing the envelope. They're legendary for adaptations of classic stories from Ray Bradbury and Theodore Sturgeon and H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, hell, look at the 90s with the HBO series Tales from the Crypt. I mean, it won probably the most Emmys a TV show ever won in consecutive, 7 years that they were on?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if do you want to add to that, Marcus?
What I was thinking about the 50s, and I just got this book of 1957 where DC got all the war comics. Quality sold them all the war comics, and they reprinted all the war comics from 57 in this one big book. And it made me think that the 50s, and they take a lot of crap, but it's a great expansion of different genres of comics. Where there were different genres in the 40s, but superheroes ruled the roost because of the war. And as the soldiers came home and the war was over, the extreme patriotism wasn't needed as much, and superheroes just kind of fell by the wayside as they wanted to read different things. So then you had Kirby and Simon created romance. The Western became really big. They were copying the TV because TV Westerns were big. So there were a ton of Western comics, tons and tons of Western comics in the 50s. Police, like I'm posting Matt Baker covers, not non-romance Matt Baker covers. I did the romance, and the authentic police cases. And Kirby and Simon really led the way. They did real life police cases and Black Magic, a horror comic. And besides, and then you could add EC on top of it. This is not even DC and Marvel. Marvel was Atlas, and they did all the giant monster comics, like giant kaiju type comics. Because after the nuclear bomb hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki, what kind of monsters were coming out? That was all over the movies. The Ant, giant, and all those movies. And so comics did the same thing. You hardly could find a superhero. There's all these different comics, and they're all 5 and 10 pages long. Nothing was like book length like they are now.
Now, Mort Weisinger was he kept the big three going: Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman. He kept Aquaman and Green Arrow back pages of Adventure.
Yeah, they were in the background. Green Arrow, particularly.
Now, after the near destruction of it by Frederick Wertham, you have its renaissance. A renaissance created by an editor called Julia Schwartz, who worked with one of his Golden Age buddies, John Broome, Gardner Fox, and Carmine Infantino, on the book that basically recreated comics, certainly recreated Marvel and DC. Showcase number 4,
With the Flash.
July 1955. The first appearance of Barry Allen, the Flash. That's what people call, and I consider to be, the first appearance of the Silver Age proper. And with that book, you have
That's right.
the floodgates are opening. The floodgates are opening because that creates the JLA, which in a roundabout way creates the Fantastic Four. Because at that time, Timely had morphed into Atlas Comics. And Atlas Comics was essentially doing, well, they did have some good books. Venus was a good book, very underrated book, Venus. Also,
Venus and Bill Everett books. They did a lot of Submariner books.
Yes,
as well.
did. Yeah, and they did a lot of good war books, very good war books, a lot of good horror as well. But they dipped their toes in with the superhero thing after the Flash, with the reintroduction of Captain America, Bucky, Human Torch, Toro, and Submariner. That did not work well, unfortunately. I don't know why that was, but it didn't work well. And then they sort of retired those characters again. And then you had a brief moment in time when Atlas actually started putting out solid stuff with Joe Manili.
Calendar.
Was that?
Somebody asked in the chat what picture is behind me, and it's a calendar. It's February.
That's Cordrath, right?
It's a Cordrath calendar. Yeah, Andy gave me Cordrath. Gave it to me. I didn't buy it. He just gave it to me.
I got to say, the 50s, out of all the decades, is the decade I know the least.
Well, you had Joe Manili working with Stan Lee on the Black Knight, on the Yellow Claw, which is really, really good stuff. Now, the Yellow Claw was reinterpreted later on by Jim Steranko as I love the redesign that they gave him. Remember, Marcus?
Yeah.
Like
with the things. Yeah, they used him up until the 70s till they couldn't.
But
then they couldn't use him anymore.
It was a Fu Manchu ripoff. But yeah, so that kind of worked, and then Joe Manili died, right? And then
he died, and you know who replaced Joe Manili was Don Heck.
Yes.
Don Heck replaced Manili, and Don Heck, he did some terrific war comics. I mean, he could really draw a war comic and a spy comic, and
very underrated.
Which is why his early Iron Man was so good, because those characters he wanted to draw.
Because I don't know Atlas, so I get these Atlas collections. So this is
those are great.
Terror.
I recommend Venus, John. Have you ever read her?
That's the first one, but it's unfortunately it's at the bottom of this stack.
Okay.
That's the first one. I've always loved that character. So this is their humor. So this is Atlas's horror. This is Atlas's humor.
Now it's an interesting to think what Marvel today would look like if Joe Manili didn't die.
This is Atlas's like girl comics.
Well, you see the same thing. What would happen if Matt Baker didn't die? What would he end up with drawing?
Well, I don't think Jack would have wanted to stay in, because he was the main target in Seduction of the Innocent. When you think of Seduction of the Innocent, you think of his of the headlights, the infamous headlights cover.
That's true.
I think he would have wanted to have gotten out of there. A lot of people did. That man really almost destroyed the that would be an interesting clobbering time to do, talk about Worth and dissect some of the stuff that he did.
Well, I can't pull it up, but I got the Venus and I got the Sci-Fi Atlas ones over here at the bottom.
They're pretty good. So anyways, for DC, you had some really neat ones outside of the resurgence of the superheroes. You had Rex the Wonder Dog, done by Gil Kane. Which gave birth to a character that I love, that I don't know if any of you guys know, the Detective Chimp.
Oh, I love the Detective Chimp.
Yeah. I love Detective Chimp. And then you had the Phantom Stranger, done by Carmine Infantino and John Broome, which was sort of a weird Tales from the it was sort of like a Twilight Zone thing. He basically was the narrator. It was only in the mid '60s with Jim Aparo that he sort of became a whatever the hell it is he was. He didn't really do anything.
Yeah,
Nobody could really
he was
figure
just
out what
like,
he did.
he was just like a guy that walked around and did stuff.
But there were comics by Dell and Gold Key through the 60s, from the 50s to the 60s, and DC that were based on Western stars and different heroes in the movies. Guys we don't even remember. Wakely, that Gene Colan drew.
Are we going to the 60s now, or we finished with the 50s?
No, we're just not quite yet. We have to talk about. We have to acknowledge Little Dot, Richie Rich, Hot Stuff, Casper. Those they really took off in the 50s and the 60s. Yes, and Archie Comics. I think that was their zenith, really, in the 50s and the 60s. So I mean, I don't know what those characters are doing now, but I had to.
So how would you, like in a nutshell, the 50s?
It was a hodgepodge. It was a hodgepodge of everything, but in the middle, it was an explosion, a reinvention with the Flash. Barry Allen saved comics. Frederick Wortham almost killed it. Barry Allen saved it.
Oh, okay, because in the 50s, it seemed like in the 40s, it seemed like everything was mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
All the superhero origins were magic and mysticism, and then in the 50s, it was science, or pseudoscience. So, but like you're right, I forgot how much humor comics came out of the 50s.
Oh, wow.
There was humor comics in the 40s, but the 50s it was a lot. Which brings us to the
Jerry
60s.
Lewis,
Jerry Lewis, Bob Hope.
Dobie
comics.
Gillis. They did the Dobie Gillis comic.
Yep.
Now the 60s. The 60s is the era of Stan and Jack.
Right.
When Marvel held court. That they owned it.
And Steve Ditko.
Yeah.
And Steve Ditko, yeah.
Because Spider-Man is Spider-Man.
But they owned it. They owned it. They just owned it. The only way that DC came close was with the 66 show, with the television show. That was the only time that DC was as hip as Marvel was in the 60s.
Yes, Superman in the 50s, Batman in the 50s. It was
Batman, before the movie, not Batman. Batman comic was a detective was always in danger of being canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And then the book, every Batman book exploded with the movie, with the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then even in the 70s, Detective was going to get canceled. Detective was always going to get canceled. So it never sold as well. And now we know Batman in the last 40 years has just been a juggernaut. But through the 70s, he was just Batman. Nobody cared, not really, except out of Neil Adams. But after that, they didn't keep the same quality up as that. But like in the 60s, yeah, you're right. They owned it. The Marvel owned it. Marvel not only created, like we all know the characters, but the continued story. They were the first one to do continued story.
That's what I was going to bring up. Like in the 60s,
full length, forgetting the full length story. The DC would have a full length story. Here's Composite Superman, the super full length novel, and it'd be like just one comic.
Right.
Every Marvel comic was a full length story, even if Stan and Jack did chapters at first. But it was everything was a full length comic unless they had to do half.
I was going to say the biggest innovation. Well, there's two big innovations in my mind about comics, and of course we're talking about DC, was continuity and
character development.
And character development. I couldn't think
because of the continuity.
Continuity and character development.
Something that DC never had. God bless them. They never had.
It's a soap opera.
When I read those early Justice League comics, you could swap the costumes and it doesn't matter. You know that this is Green Lantern because of the costume, but the words coming out of his mouth, the behavior might as well be Aquaman. But there's no way you're going to mistake the Human Torch for Reed Richards or Ben Grimm or even Spider-Man. These guys had distinct personalities. And to the point, this is causing like problems today where like Spider-Man doesn't behave like that, or the Human Torch doesn't behave like, because they were so distinct over decades. And I trace that back to the 60s. I can't really think like in the golden age, all the superheroes were just like, I liked them. They were tough, manly men guys, but only a few of them had I'll say like what I read of and forgive me, my brain's getting foggy right now. But Dr. Fate always kind of struck out as like an individual personality, even in the 40s. But everybody else, they were just whatever your tough uncle would say, that's what Superman would say. Whatever your war hero dad would say, that's what Batman would say.
Gardner Fox was a better writer in the 40s with characters than he was in the 60s. The JSA had personality. The Justice League did not have a personality.
They were really hard edited. They really edited hard in the 60s in DC. Those are Weisiger and the editors drove the stories more than the writers did. I imagine in the 40s, Fox drove his stories more than he did, and Julius Schwartz.
Also, to be fair, they were on defense after the seduction of the innocent, the 10 cent.
Yeah. So like I said, the only Golden Age writer that still maintained his teeth was Robert Kanigher and John Broome over at DC. Those were the only two. Everyone else, like nobody wanted to ruffle any feathers. Nobody wanted to push the envelope like they were doing at Marvel. Everyone wanted to just toe the line. Superman went from a social justice Hercules, a social justice Samson, a real social justice, not, I told the racist to sit down in the back of the bus and everyone clapped kind of social justice. I'm talking, beating up corrupt crooks and lawyers and businessmen. You remember, John, the way Superman was back in the 40s. He was a two-handed fist, fists of justice. And in the 60s, it was just, gosh, I wonder, who do I want to marry, Lana Lang or Lois Lane? He was castrated. It was a lame character for the most part.
But that's what Jack and Steve before Stan brought in the action, that the other character, they didn't have action. Even in Fantastic 401, there was action. They fought the Atlas monsters. And Fantastic Four wasn't even fully formed, but Spider-Man was fully formed, from issue 1 on. And they threw punches. They jumped off the page. Right. And DC wasn't doing that. It took DC all the half a decade till 66 and 67, 68 when they started.
You're right, Marcus. I didn't think of that about Marvel, but all the Marvel superheroes except Spider-Man and maybe Doctor Strange. So I guess that's a Ditko.
Doctor Strange came through.
They took 10 issues or so to form, But Spider-Man, that was from issue 1, but maybe not the first page, but by the last page of Spider-Man, that was Spider-Man. Doctor Strange, the only thing that really changed about him was, I guess they wanted to give him a red cape. You know what I mean?
Well, he got different powers and they got more mystical. But think about the uniqueness of who talks about this. Somebody talks about this online. I forget who. The uniqueness of Spider-Man. Here was the guy who was the same age as the sidekicks.
Right.
But he was the hero. He was the adult hero. And he was going to high school. And he had trouble with girls. I mean, he dated a girl older than him, who wasn't going to college going to high school with him because they made fun of him. And he had somebody who made fun of him in high school and he was a wimp, but he could pick up a car.
Yeah,
exactly. And they were comic books tailor-made for baby boomers. They were tailor-made for the audience so that's why they liked them. They were hip. The baby boomers read them up until the college age. They never put them down. And then later on, a lot of them went to write those characters themselves. And I mean, I don't know. A lot of people might like that. My opinion on the matter.
Doctor Strange didn't wear a mask at first. He went through a strange mask phase in the late 60s, early 70s.
But what did they do with the Avengers? Like all the Avengers, that's all the characters. And automatically in the second issue, Hulk gets into a fight with Iron Man and Thor and leaves.
Right.
Who does that? And then by issue 15, all the big guys left, and Captain America's sitting there with 2 villains and an archer, and 4 people, and they're completely underpowered. And then when they brought back Goliath, he got stuck at 10 feet. There was always something in the Marvel comic. They never did that. It's a soap opera aspect of the comic that came through. And just think about all the controversies. And this is the flagship Justice League. This is supposed to be the the Flat. They're going to have adventures. They're going to defeat Dormammu. You know, they're going to defeat Ultron. But who created Ultron? One of the Avengers. Go figure. Who does that? And there was all that personality that Stan and Jack and Stan. I don't know how much. The personality is probably a little more Stan, but the artist put him in too. I mean, Steve Ditko had a lot to do with Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange was an ass. He was an aloof pain in the neck, and they wrote him like that for 40 years. Like, he was kind of, I'm Doctor Strange. I'm Master Mr. Arx, you know, forget you.
I love that origin story. And I'll never forget them for screwing it up in the live-action movie. But I love that Doctor Strange origin story. That's possibly my favorite of the Silver Age origin stories. The arrogant neurosurgeon who
I mean, who does that? There was no DC character in the 40s. Everybody was a rich milksop like Bruce Wayne, hiding the fact. Oh, like, you know, hey, who was the Sandman? Remember Sandman? He was like the rich guy, and now I'm going to put on a hat.
They were all like derived from. I'm like halfway through the Scarlet Pimpernel. He was a rich dandy in his
That's right.
real life, to the point even his wife was just like she wasn't even attracted to him. You know, in the introduction they spoil it that later on she finds out that her husband's the Scarlet Pimpernel, and it basically re-energizes her lust for this guy. You know what I mean? but that's all the DC guys. You know, they were all rich. Fancy lads is a nice way to put it.
Fancy, dandy. I like dandy. I like the word dandy. That was a good one.
Not Clark Kent. He actually had to work for a living.
No, not Clark Kent. That's true.
They mentioned a really good thing there. Wally Wood's Thunder Agents. I don't know that much about them. Can you elaborate?
I Wally Wood's Thunder Agents. I'll start with. I got the deluxe comics in the 80s because it was George Perez artwork on the cover, and anything
terrific artwork.
So Matt Barr's coming in with the declaration, the best of the 70s. Good night. Can't argue with the declaration.
There's an argument for the 70s, definitely.
But it was this, I think 64. Wally Wood, it was Tower Comics, and every issue was like 52 pages. So every issue was you know what we'd call like an annual size. And the artwork was phenomenal. It was Wally Wood would do two stories. He would do the breakout character, which was Dynamo, and then I think he did 2 Dynamo stories, and then there was Lightning by Gil Kane, and sometimes there was George Tuska doing the Raven, which was just terrible. That was the worst. And No Man, oh my God, that's my favorite.
He is Mike Sikowski, and some of the artists that he ended up using. Well,
but it was a really bizarre comic. So the premise was they worked for the UN, but they were really an American super team. There was a scientist who invented all these devices, and he, just like every comic book scientist, they just memorized all these complex formulas. They never wrote anything down. So when he was killed by evil agents, these devices could never be replicated. They gave all the devices to their best agents. So Dynamo got the belt. No Man was a robot. He got the invisibility cloak, and he had the coolest power. He could project his consciousness into another body. So he would become reckless. He would just like jump off the helicopter.
Yeah, I remember.
Torpedo. The body would get crushed, and then another body would wake up.
He had a great look too. He had a great look.
I love No Man. The existential stuff that you could do with that character is so good. And then there was Lightning. Lightning would wear a costume that accelerated him at, like, he could move like the Flash, but the faster he moved, the more he aged. So this is the brilliance of this is, it was really like a schizophrenic comic because characters died.
They stayed dead.
And they stayed dead. One of them they had a mental helmet, and he had like Xavier and mind control. He could telepathy and stuff. But when he activated the helmet, he had a different personality. He was a bad guy infiltrating the Thunder Agents to steal all their secrets, and then he would turn on the Mento helmet, and he became a good guy, and he didn't remember when he turned off the helmet, and eventually the helmet killed him, like it, you know, and he stayed dead. And Lightning got old and died, and they had to get a new Lightning. And the Lightning there was a character. They had a support team of regular military guys, and the leader of that guy something. He was like such a man's man, guy something. He got recruited to be the new Lightning, and the woman, the female on the team, her name was Kitty. She was like, "Don't do it. It's a death sentence." And he was like, "No, it's an honor." It was so sad. Like it was like Dead Man Walking, And then the stories were written for children, but like the characters, it was such a bizarre comic book.
Yeah. It was like kind of like it's like superheroes crossed with James Bond.
Right. It was James Bond comics with really cool characters, amazing art when the art was good. Then you had the George Tuska stuff that I just couldn't stand. And then really great characters, really great designs, pathos, guys dying, but it was set in a Julius Schwartz, Gardner Fox Justice League comic. It was so all over the place. And I think 24 issues, it made it to 24. And here's I went into a comic book store as they decided they didn't want to do a comics anymore. They just wanted to become a Magic the Gathering shop. So every comic in the store was $1. You better believe I spent like hours just like crawling over a long box. I got almost every issue near mint condition of the original Thunder Agents, $1 a piece. Like the 3 issues that I had to find to fill in the blanks each one of them cost more than $20, but I got the rest of the series from 1 to whatever for $1 a piece. Yeah.
Even Dynamo had the strength belt, and he would run out of strength, and he'd get defeated in like every issue. Like They each had an issue that had these great powers, but they always had it. It's almost like the Stanley. They had an issue where they would fail.
Right.
But the personalities were like the Justice League. It was the weirdest thing. That's why it didn't last. Also,
it was half Marvel and half DC.
Double-sized comics. And
it kind of hindered the comic. And every issue they fought the same bad guy. It was kind of like, like a cartoons, like Inspector Gadget always fought that same guy. Every issue they fought the same guy, the Warlord.
Hollywood, Dan Atkins.
Now, I'd be remiss to not mention. I don't know much about it because it's not really my thing. But this was the beginning and the boom of the underground scene, championed by people like Robert Crumb, Kim Deitch, Trina Robbins, Spain Rodriguez. You had stuff like the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. You had stuff like Zap Comics. What was the name of the cat? Felix? No, Fritz the cat.
Yeah.
And then you had, and this is sort of part of this. The first X-rated cartoon, which was Fritz the Cat, which was I think in 1969. So that's not really my scene, but I'd be remiss not to mention that.
And don't forget about Steve Ditko made an underground magazine, Wits End.
Wits End. And that
Wits End was actually Wood. Wally Wood made it. And then Ditko did work in it. Like the mainstream guys did do work in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I got the hardcover collector. I haven't read it yet.
Ditko and Wood worked together a lot.
At the bottom of this stack of comics.
It's Mr. A. Ooh, let's not forget about Charlton.
Yeah.
Charlton had a bit of a boom there with Ditko, with Captain Atom, the reinvention of the Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Charlton is a comic company that just went under the radar. Like somebody like Marcus posts every day like romance covers.
They're all in Charlton now. Yeah.
Somebody posts just Charlton covers of like, oh my God, the art was really, really good.
Yeah, look at the packaging.
Yeah. The
typeset letterer. Right. Like they wouldn't even
want
to letter.
Literally, it was money laundering for the mob. They did not care what they published. The owner actually went to jail. That's how bad it was.
Derby, Connecticut.
The comic books in the 40s were basically money laundering. That's what Leibovitz and Donenfeld did pretty much. That's how they made their dough.
So the 60s to me was innovation. It was elevating the medium. It was I don't know if it was like a reaction to the Wortham scare. Like we got to make these people think that comic books are garbage. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, like we're going to make them not garbage. You had Will Eisner, you had, like I said, Marvel Comics. And I think, and then we had all this underground stuff. I don't know if the underground stuff was helping elevate the medium or not, but it was making older college kids fans of comics.
You also had like the pop art thing with Liechtenstein and Warhol, where they were basically redoing panels from comic book, like romance stuff, and like redrawing them. So
yeah.
it became cool.
John Romita got it. Irv Nova got it.
Comic
A
books
couple
became
other big
cool
names got it out of them. Yeah.
Yeah, comic books became cool in the 60s. College kids liked them, high school kids liked them. They were not just a dirty secret that you didn't want your friends to know about. They became cool.
And then, Steranko came in, and nobody had a bigger reputation with such little artwork like Steranko. What did he make? Like 50 comics in his
Not
career?
even, yeah.
Less.
Him and Dave Macchiaselli, right? They both of them have such a little output, but they made such a gigantic output.
Oddly enough, John, he made more paperback covers for The Shadow than he did actual comic books.
Yeah, I think he did.
But he was so innovative at that time,
Yep. It says Steranko right on it.
Perfect Steranko Shadow.
Yeah. And I got this by Steranko. He did this in 3 months. 3 months. Steranko. Look at this. 3 months. Takes a long time to make a quality comic book. I have on good, but Steranko made a masterpiece in 3 freaking months. So go figure.
But on the other hand, Steranko needed a fill-in by Jack Kirby in the 3 issues he did of Captain America. So 6 1 half dozen the other. But he was the first guy that Stan Lee let write. First artist he let write. He let Steranko write before Ditko was gone by then, or Kirby. Like he let Steranko write his own comic, like that Shield comic. Don't forget he did all those Shield comics, starting off with layouts by Kirby for a long time before he did those other ones that are more groundbreaking.
That's
those
true.
Are wild comics.
So anything you want to fish up? We'll move on to the 70s. Anything you want to say to finish off the 60s?
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm a big fan of the 60s comics, and they still had Westerns, they still had war comics, they still had romance comics.
Oh, yeah. There's probably the height of Joe Kubert was in the 60s.
All right, we'll move into the 70s. So,
now the 70s, the beginning of the grim and gritty era, the beginning of the anti-hero, where you had such novelties as The Punisher, Wolverine, Blade, the Master of Kung Fu, Shang-Chi. I refuse to say Shang-Chi. It's Shang-Chi.
It's Shang-Chi.
Dracula.
Dracula.
Exactly. And then you had the such wonderful things like the Warren magazines that while they came out in the 60s, they really hit their zenith in the 70s. You had the Marvel really did good stuff there with the Tomb of what were the Dracula comics called? Tomb
of Dracula. Dracula Lives was the magazine.
Dracula Lives. Thank you. And you had the Zombie, and you had Savage Tales and
Rampaging Hulk.
Savage Sword of Conan. The reinvention of Conan. I mean, Roy Thomas was essentially Howard created the character. Roy Thomas recreated the character. I would argue that without Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith and John Buscema, nobody would really know who the hell Conan is unless you're.
Isn't that like Savage Sword of Conan is like the official start of the Bronze Age?
No, Great Conan #1.
Yeah, 1970.
It was relaxing of the comics code.
Exactly.
And so we're allowed to do Dracula, allowed to do Frankenstein, allowed to use the word zombie.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went crazy.
You told me, I always thought that Marvel said Magia because the comics code wouldn't let them use Mafia. But Stan Lee was just afraid to say Mafia because it was a little.
Yeah, I thought that was because of the comics code.
The wise guy still controlled distribution, so he didn't want to piss anybody off.
That's funny. Yeah. That's apparently when I can't think of the guy who wrote The Godfather. Martin, what's his name?
Mario Puzo.
Yeah, Mario Puzo. When he wrote The Godfather, he actually brought it to the Mafia. He's like, I don't want to piss you guys off. Give me my blessing. What do you want me to change? And they read the book and they said, take out this word Mafia. And he replaced it with mob.
La Cosa Nostra.
That was the
Cosa
only.
Nostra.
Yeah, that was the only big thing, the only big change. Now the 70s. Now the 70s. I listen to Chuck Dixon every Wednesday on Ask Chuck Dixon, and he always goes off on comics in the 70s, and it's the only time I want to. Chuck, you're wrong. There was so much good stuff for the 70s.
I know.
I guess he's older than me, so like
I agree with you, but he's 10 years older than me, so
there's so much good 70s comics. I mean, we get Star Wars. Everybody loves those Star Wars. Me, like Micronauts, the X-Men,
the X-Men, yeah,
Fantastic Four. Somebody over here said the
Iron Fist, the 15 issues of Iron Fist,
and
Iron Fist.
I'm realizing it, but because I skipped over it at the time. But like Jonah Hex over at DC and Sergeant Rock and all of those, the 70s had such great comics. I say that there's bad comics in every decade.
Well,
and
I think
comics in Marvel, but the good comics were Jim Starlin's Warlock. Guys,
Jim Starlin, Captain Marvel, Jim Starlin.
Get the Jim Starlin Warlock comics.
Oh, those are fantastic.
Well, I did a series on those with Kelsey Shannon. If you look at my playlist for two
yeah, those are good. Those are good.
And you could watch a legend like Kelsey Shannon discovering Warlock for the first time. His jaw was dropping.
But I think the Warlock comics and the Captain Marvel comics of Starlin and Steve Englehart and Steve Gerber's Defenders, I mean, they were groundbreaking. You're not wrong. I think and Jungle Action with Black Panther, Doug McGregor and his essays. I think that's what Chuck is complaining about. There's like Warlock does a lot of navel gazing, but that was part of Warlock. But he did not like Chuck doesn't write like that. He's really to the point, bread and butter going. And I think that's what he's really talking about. Although he probably wouldn't say anything bad about Jim Starlin, but that's what I think. We all love that. That was the 70s Marvel was the logical expansion of what was the 60s Marvel. That they were going to get a little more erudite and a little more literate, And I think that kind of made a lot of sense.
Well, I think in the 60s you had a lot of like first generation writers, Stan Lee and all those guys. By the 70s you had fanboys like Roy Thomas.
The boomers took over. Yeah. My favorite thing of the 70s was an emphasis on horror. Horror was a big thing there, and also the reinvention of Jack Kirby's Fourth World. That to me is the shining diamond of the 70s. I adore the Fourth World.
It's funny because that's one of the only Jack Kirby things I haven't read yet.
I read that a bunch of different times. Yeah,
I read everybody else doing the Fourth World except for Kirby. And,
that's a shame, John. That's a
shame.
shame.
I just happened to find what Jimmy Olsen's pal with the first appearance of the Fourth World.
134.
Yeah,
it's the poor Fourth World.
The back issue, it was a collectibles place. They got like old clothes and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like a flea market store. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my god, this is like near mint condition. So that. I want to wait till I get like 5 or 6 of them so I can read them all.
Well, Kirby never called it the Fourth World. Other people called it the Fourth World. And what you got to do, and you're going to have to look this up, is there's a certain reading order of the Fourth World because the books did not come out in order.
Right.
Because they all came out of the jumble, which kind of confused the whole story. And then Infantino loved Kirby and hated Kirby at the same time. So they didn't know what to make of the Fourth World. Although without Darkseid and those characters, where would DC Comics be today? Like,
you also
it was such a big villain.
You also had the invention of the direct market with Paul Gulacy's Saber.
I got that book. I used to get that.
Eclipse Comics, the very first title the Eclipse Comics ever published.
Detective Inc.
Mm-hmm.
Really? So Saber is the very first direct market comic?
Yes, sir.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Cat Ironwood was an innovator.
Yeah,
you spoke to Cat Ironwood.
Yeah, Cat Ironwood is one of my first. conversations.
Yeah, I saw that. I was there. I got you some questions. She was a nice lady.
She was
I wish we'd have her
super
on
cool.
again.
She was sweet. Yeah.
We talked for a couple of days before she was nervous to go live. I don't know if she thought I was gonna like bust her chops or whatever. I talked to her husband. He was being a good husband, protecting her. And once I guess they realized that I was just an earnest fan, they were like, let's go. And
yeah, Eclipse was a band leader. I wish they were still around. They were the best.
Eclipse Comics.
Mm-hmm.
There was like a trinity. It was Eclipse first and Comico.
Yes,
I became obsessed with all of them.
Yeah, they were all good. Yeah, I got books from all.
The 80s though. That was the 70s. Like I was waiting
yeah, that was more like the 80s. Yeah.
But I will say this: Jim Shooter took
78.
over. He took over at 78. Okay, so I'm going to put
He
him.
became an associate editor, but he went to Marvel. But he editor in chief in 78.
Now, when they say comics were always political, I immediately go to the 70s. And I always think like this: if comics were always political, then all the superheroes fighting the Nazis in the 40s but that was just popularism. You know what I mean? But like in the 70s, we had the Green Lantern, Green Arrows, our traveling heroes. Everything Steve Gerber did was political.
Well, and not so much, John. I'm gonna have to contradict you there. Early Superman was a social justice warrior. Read the first 20 or so. Yeah.
But here's where I draw the line: is he was nobody likes bad landlords. That's not a right-wing, left-wing thing. Nobody likes nobody likes drunk drivers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the Republicans are anti-drunk drivers and the Democrats are pro-drunk. You know what I mean? What Superman did was everybody agreed that they were bad. Wife beaters were bad. Drunk drivers were bad. Scam artists were bad. Saboteurs were bad. When I talk about politics, like Chester, we got to do something for black people.
Oh yeah, that's when the extreme left-leaning hippy dippy BS started.
It was more like hippies. It isn't like it is now.
Right. Like everybody hated Nazis, but nowadays the social justice warriors, they want, we hate Nazis. You're a good boy.
Most of the comics they had politics and they had some agenda, but they had good story first. Mm-hmm. So you didn't have to, like Captain America series with Englehart and Salvi Summer. It didn't start politically. In fact, it had a lot to do with Captain America getting canceled, way early, through the media. Like it's a little ahead of its time. And at the end, when they finally decided with I don't want to spoil it. Anybody wants to read the trade paperback. It becomes more political, but it was a good story before it became political. It isn't quite. And also, Captain America and Falcon are fighting Banshee and the X-Men. They're not having coffee on the side talking about, hey, it's really nice I'm hanging out with you black guy, Oh, aren't you nice, you white guy? Like,
and then Falcon's girlfriend is being. And then the Falcon's girlfriend is being the most insufferable pain in the ass.
Oh my God! Yeah, they didn't really exactly. And they called Captain America honky throughout the whole session.
He's like saving her as she falls off a building, and she's like,
"I have to say, I love Captain America." But boy, before that series, and they had Captain America of course, the Captain America of the 50s was racist and all that, but that was all new. It wasn't all old tropes as it is now. That was 1972. But before that, in defense of Englehart, Captain America just went around on motorcycles, called a honky, beat up some college hippies, like it was just ridiculous. Like if you really
a good old fashioned hippie bashing,
Red Skull. There was a Red Skull. The Red Skull issues that John Romita drew. Basically, Red Skull created BLM, like in New York City. I reread those not that long ago. I'm like, oh my God! But back then we didn't have BLM. It was what it was. There was the Black Panther movement, and it was all it's all new to us. So there's a little different. And you could also talk to these guys. You can't talk to these people anymore. They weren't arguing.
Some of it was good like that, but a lot of it was insufferable, like Green Lantern, Green Arrow. You done
That's
so
pretty
much
bad.
for the blue skins and the green skins.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
that's the one that's really bad. Yeah, that's
That infuriates me. Like if I wrote that, I would have that same scene and that guy lecturing. So for those of you who don't know, they were like going through Harlem, and this old black guy comes up to
beautifully drawn.
and he's like, "You've been saving the blue skins and you're saving the greens. What have you done for the black skins?" And then Hal Jordan like mopes away in sadness and sorrow and defeated, by the wisdom of the sage black. I would have looked at him and said, "What have I done? I saved your life. I saved your daughter's life. I saved your life.
Saved the world.
I saved the whole freaking world." Do you know why you're not being destroyed by purple space aliens? Because of me. Okay, I'm sorry I don't have time here to get you off of welfare. I'm sorry because I'm in space saving your ass from cosmic horror that would destroy you if you even looked at it. So shut up, say thank you. Don't even say thank you. Go get a bottle of booze and shut up.
One of the major problems with that series is Danny O'Neill did not really like the powered character, science fiction character. You did great work on Superman and depowered him, but he really wasn't comfortable with that. He liked the street character.
Right.
So Green Arrow really shone in that, and Green Lantern became kind of like a dullard,
I hated that about O'Neill. He moves in after a mediocre 20-year run of Wonder Woman comics by Bob Kanigher, and all of a sudden, I'm going to depower her and turn her.
Oh, that was that, but that was also because of the Avengers too, right? The TV show.
Then that sucked. So then he moves on to Superman. I'm gonna take away his kryptonite.
Well, they told him to depower Superman. That was editorial.
Come on, man! Like, look,
Julius Schwartz took over Superman, and he wanted.
I take my hat off to him as an editor and as a person that helped save Batman and shepherd him throughout the years. But the man sucked as a writer. I'm sorry, he let his politics poison his.
Well, when he was with there's a couple of things, like Shooter fired him,
and
that's why he became the Batman editor. Shooter fired him. He went on Iron Man, and you'll remember, they had that great story. He goes, "Well, alcoholics don't get done in one issue," and then we had 3 years of Tony Stark living in a garbage can.
Marcus,
was Iron Man.
You're forgetting, Marcus, what he did to Speedy. You don't quit dope in an issue. That's a monkey you have on your back the rest of your life.
Well, making Speedy have heroin at all, and you go through all the comics. There's nothing you can't. There's nothing that says he's on drugs, and nowhere. All of a sudden, out of the blue, he's on drugs this whole time. Are you insane?
But the way he was able to kick it. I know people I went to high school with that died of heroin overdoses. You don't kick that shit like that. It's on your back for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I think it's funny with Wonder Woman. The very first issue that they took her out of the Star Spangled costume. They put her in this like white, bell bottom.
Yeah, that was the feminist thing. No power.
And the very first issue, it said "Women's Lib" issue, and then Wonder Woman's tied up with her hands behind her back, and I just think it's like it was the weirdest optics. And then Gloria Steinem, of all people, got mad and wrote an article. You depowered the most powerful comic book character. You know what I mean? And
put her on the cover of Ms. Magazine #1.
Yeah, and then Danny O'Neill was like, "I get it. I'm sorry. That guy." I agree 100%. I think he's a legendary editor, and I do think his retirement is like a bookend of like the good period of comics. He had a great philosophy. He cared about what he was doing. He demanded quality from like the guy. He hired quality and demanded quality, and he also knew when to leave him alone. But yeah, as a writer, I got to agree with you, Tony. The only comic that I could really, really remember by Denny O'Neill was The Question, and I remember not really liking it at the time.
I'll never forget what he did to The Question. I'll never forgive him for that. Just because he hated objectivism.
Well, he was fired from Marvel for being lazy.
What's that?
Shooter fired him for being lazy.
Oh.
He didn't do his work. He made his assistant do all the work. And so then he got fired, and DC snapped him up, and he became the legendary Batman editor. Because it was right before that.
They made lemonade out of lemons,
He was a decent Spider-Man, though. I mean, it was okay.
But his question, everybody talks about it like it's okay. I challenge anybody to go back and reread Danny O'Neill's question.
John, the art is beautiful.
The art is beautiful.
It's really good.
But what I just have to laugh because liberal Danny O'Neill, the last issue ends with the question going, "City's on fire. I can't save it. I'm leaving." That's liberalism for you.
The irony is that at Charlton, he dialogued a lot of Ditko's stories.
Did Ditko hate it?
I don't know. I don't know. They work. He was like, I don't know. I haven't read that. I have to look into that. But he did work with them. I think at some point, you had to work with the people. There's not much you could do about it.
I mean,
they weren't fighting. Nobody fought.
He hired conservatives and left them alone. You know what I mean? So it's not like
it wasn't like it is now. No, that's true.
Yeah, but I agree. I love Danny O'Neill. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a legend. I think he earned his spot in comic book legend. But as an editor, but this so the 70s. We'll finish up the 70s. There was a lot of let's make it relevant.
Relevant. That was the word.
Sort of a resurgence of sword and sorcery, and also you have to. I forgot to add. I don't know what the hell you would classify epic comics and heavy metal or metal hurlan, like art scene kind of a thing. But that's when you get those things. You get metal hurlan in 1974 in France. Right. Published by Humanoids, and then you have the American edition published by National Lampoon in 78 or 77, heavy metal.
Right. Yeah, there was that influence of I'll say European influence. Mm-hmm. That was the first wave of European influence. Mm-hmm. But I was going to say, isn't it the 70s the first time Stan Lee ditched the Comics Code Authority and they did the Harry Osborn on drugs story?
Harry Osborn on acid. Yes.
Yeah. So they attempted to do that. I mentioned it before. Steve Gerber's. If you read Howard the Duck, it was politics, but not left wing, right wing politics. It in the first issue, it's Howard the Duck is climbing up a mountain of credit cards to throw himself off. That's political. That's It's personal politics. I'm in so much credit card debt, I'm just going to kill myself, kind of thing. And then he, meets what's her name? I can't remember the girl's name. Brenda, Beverly
Flitzer.
Yeah, that you know what I mean. So a good chick will get you. It doesn't matter if you're in debt. If you got a hot chick, it works for me. You know what I mean. So, and then all of those stories were drug induced or they were socially inspired. I hated Howard the Duck as a kid. It wasn't until I was an adult that I liked the character.
John, quick side note, what'd you think of the movie?
I never saw it because I hated Howard the Duck. I'm talking about movie. I don't see it. I told my wife, I said, I finally want to watch Howard the Duck. She goes, stupid movie, horny duck. She goes, you can watch it on your own.
Yeah, I mean, what's the question about Howard the Duck and bestiality there? I mean, clearly he was sleeping with Beverly.
Well, that goes back to the 30s with Betty Boop and Bimbo the dog, and Droopy Drawers and Red Hot Riding Hood. It's a staple.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a good staple, but it's a staple.
It's a staple, right? I don't think you could do that staple today.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you could, as degenerate as the society has gotten.
There'll be a certain part of it.
I'm sure I haven't. I'm just guessing, but I'm sure Chewbacca's got a human-looking girlfriend in the newest issues of Star Trek right now.
Right.
Marvel Comics was saved by getting the license to Star Wars. I feel like Star Wars needs a mention. Yeah, I mentioned that right at the beginning when we talked about the 70s. All right, so we'll be here all night if we don't move on to the 80s.
It's already
the grim and gritty period. The period of Alan Moore and Frank Miller and Howard Chaykin.
But it's the black and white explosion.
The black and white explosion.
And that was other than the underground comics, the black and white explosion was the first time that anybody could make their own comic.
Now we have a good perspective here, gentlemen. Okay, I was a little boy in this decade, really, really small, just learning how to read. John was probably, I don't know how old John was.
I graduated high school.
So we have a good perspective here where the three of us were so let's talk about it.
So the 80s to me, like, it was the beginning of the direct market. I know Saber came out in 78, but it wasn't, we had Comico, we had First Comics, we had Eclipse, Love and Rockets, Cerebus,
Fantagraphics,
Fantagraphics. All the stuff to me is the 80s. At the same time, over at Marvel, we had Jim Shooter era, which is the high point of Marvel. Like Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, Stanley, they created a foundation, and to me, Jack Kirby, Jim Shooter just reinforced that and built a structure on that foundation. There was some wobbly Roy Thomas here and stuff like that, but Jim Shooter made we had the Dark Phoenix, and Marcus knows, he's been watching me do the Sunday comics. We're getting close to the Dark Phoenix. It was a real dark story with real adult themes to it that I'm sure that I'm going to be picking up stuff now with these Epstein file releases, because I'm amazed it came out under the Comics Code Authority. So comics in the 80s, they didn't pander to the audience unless they were supposed to, like Ewok comics and stuff like that. But that's a whole other story. But Marvel didn't pander, and then DC was forced to change. With the Crisis on Infinite Earths, for good or for bad, DC started to ape Marvel. And then you had things like Teen Titans, which would have been welcome in Marvel. It was a Marvel style comic.
Marvel creators.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Jim Shooter injected a lot of liquidity in the Marvel by licensing the Transformers and G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe.
Huge sellers for them, especially G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe under Larry Hama. That lasted until the 90s.
He used to ask at cons when I was a kid. We go to cons in the 80s, like 81, 82. And he would say, who's our best-selling comics? And everybody would say, well, it's X-Men or it's whatever. He goes, no, Star Wars and G.I. Joe. Without Star Wars and G.I. Joe, there'd be no Marvel Comics. They gave them all the money because they sold so much on the newsstand. Because normies would pick up a G.I. Joe comic.
And I don't know if you guys remember this, but I remember, I was small, but I remember they actually had commercials for the Transformers and G.I. Joe comics.
They did. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, they had commercials on TV for comic books.
And then,
it wasn't X-Men and it wasn't Spider-Man. Yeah.
And then also you had the Marvel's experimental phase, which was Epic Comics and then Star Comics. Does everybody remember Star Comics?
Star Comics was the children's line.
Yeah, children's. So they experimented. And then you had Jim Shooter's magnum opus, which pisses me off that they purposely destroyed it. The New Universe. That could have actually worked.
Well, he told me the New Universe was supposed to be made with a budget. So Walt Simonson and all these guys created a lot of those concepts, and they were supposed to work on it. And then the powers that be, the people above him, pulled his budget. So now he had to scramble around with all the new guys. Now, like that's Paul Ryan and Lee Weeks, but they weren't the big names.
But not,
so it kind of fell. It didn't sell as much as they wanted.
Not only that, Marcus, don't you remember how they ended it? They blew up Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, that's because John Byrne hated Jim Shooter.
Crashed that ship. They purposely crashed it. Had he had been able to, I think it would have been a lot better than it.
Well, when Shooter finally got fired from Marvel, Byrne said, "I got to draw." The Pit, Sal Buscema, Stan Drake. And he wrote it, and he blew up Pittsburgh on purpose because that's where Shooter's from.
And then you had
it's crazy stuff, man.
And then you had some really good stuff with B.G. Chichester, the Shadow Line imprint from Image, which was really good comics, John.
They were good, yeah.
I have all those. At this point, I was buying almost everything by Marvel and DC that I could afford to get my hands on. That included Shadow Line and so for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Marvel started an imprint, meaning they had like little publishing houses within their First thing they did was Epic, and what Epic was creators had their own. They owned it. Marvel would publish it, but you owned it. So you brought like it was
run by the late great Archie Goodwin.
Right, Archie.
That's right.
May he rest in peace.
So they had like they brought ElfQuest over from Warp Graphics. It was Dreadstar, right? I'm not mistaken.
Dreadstar, that's right.
So Wendy Pini owned it, but they got Marvel and it was phenomenal. I remember Chris Claremont had that series Black Dragon. It was the first time.
Yeah, they owned it, right?
Right.
And don't forget, guys, through Image, that's when you had the square-bound graphic novel, starting with the death of Captain Marvel. And then you had stuff like John. What's the name of that J.M. DeMatteis thing? It was Moonshadow.
Moonshadow.
Moonshadow was good.
It was Vertigo before Vertigo. That's what it was. It was.
Right. I was going to bring it, but now I can bring this up that RT Marvel was what they were calling graphic novels, and it was so they would make like their mainstream characters, but they would make more edgier stuff than they would normally put on the
sometimes.
So they I think the first one was the death of Captain Marvel.
Death of Captain Marvel, that's right.
And it was remarkable in the fact that it was cancer that killed him. It wasn't Thanos stabbing him in the face, and he stayed dead for a long time.
He's still dead, I think.
Yeah, he's still dead.
Yeah.
And then they followed it up. I don't know immediately, but they followed up with God Loves, Man Kills, which to me, I enjoyed it at the time, but now I can't stand it because this just defined X-Men as
right. Yeah, it was a great story at the time, which is supposed to be a Neil Adams book, by the way. And he couldn't finish it, or there was something going on, so they got Brent Anderson. And it was a really good book, but it did solidify what you hate about the X-Men.
Yeah, it just we're persecuted. We just want to be treated like
it
was a good book. I'm not gonna. Matter of fact, I looked at my copy. I have like 6 prints, so I went and bought the first print, and I'm going to read it. It's on my read. So because what followed afterwards, just like one of my favorite X-Men stories is Days of Future Past. But come on, stop revisiting that story. You know what I mean? Like they're diluting a great story. Come up with a new one. Like how many times the Legion of Superheroes are you going to do the Great Darkness Saga? That was awesome. Move on.
Now, Marvel and DC aside, the greatest thing that come out of the 80s was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
There you go.
Brand of brands. Now, I was alive when I had the toys. I loved them. I loved the TV show. It's amazing how a black and white parody comic created a $6 billion industry.
It created the black and white explosion.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the first time
Turtles came out. Everybody and their brother said, I could do this too.
Dark Horse Comics.
It really was the first time that like guys could get together and say, hey, we could do a comic too, which is what you're doing in crowdfunding. Oh, we could do a comic too. And that Image did that too, but that was like the first time for other than the underground comics. But this was a bigger explosion than that.
And not only that, you had through Eclipse Comics, manga being translated properly.
Yeah, Viz came through, yeah.
Maya the Psychic Girl. And then in Epic, you had Lone Wolf and Cub. You had that's when Robotech came in through Comico. So
Akira was published by Marvel
coming in, and that was the birth of the weeb, the American weeb.
Yeah,
that was published by Marvel. Yeah,
Maya the Psychic Girl, Area 88, Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah,
and I know that there's a few others that I'm forgetting. Barefoot Gen. These were all the first
Freeman.
What's that?
Crying Freeman. I don't know.
I didn't get that one, but I know about it. There was another one that I know I'm forgetting.
And then you had Mirage Comics with stuff like Puma Blues with Michael Zulli. Oh man, I love that. I wish somebody would collect that in an omnibus. That was such a great series.
The 80s really was. I wear my bias. The 80s to me is the best decade of comics, hands down.
It certainly was the most experimental. It certainly was when the speculator market started to hit, when the normies started to get into it, when Hollywood decided that they could actually, if they put more money into comics, comic related stuff like Batman and all that, you'd have $50 billion ticket sales for and stuff like, so it basically was, I guess, the highest crest. It made the highest watermark in comics, I would say.
Well,
And it led to the downfall in the 90s.
Yeah, Jim Shooter, like he enforced continuity. He enforced no more like deadline doom. Marvel just seemed to like just stumble along making comics.
It was Jim Shooter. It was the first time all the Marvel comics shipped on time. Was early on in his run.
Yeah, that's why he's so hated, because he cracked the whip.
Partially, yeah. Well, they were super. Like I'm reading about it now. They were also super sensitive. I mean, these guys were kind of babies about it.
Right.
You know, he set up the editorial like Mort Weisinger and Jim. Like Mort Weisinger has Superman and Julie Schwartz had Batman. So that's how it was set up at Marvel. This guy had all the Avengers comics, and this guy had this editor had this many comics. But they did cross over a lot more than they did. But he did set up fiefdoms, which they still do to this day. And I would say the 80s really lasted till about 90, to the next boom, you know.
So
to the next boom.
Let's finish up the 80s or we'll be here all night. Anything to say?
We are here all night.
All right, so let's go to the 90s.
I agree with you about it. I went to college in the 80s, and it was, SVA, and it was all experimental. All
right, comic book stores opened up. I loved going to the comic book stores. I can't help but tie my own personal experiences, to this decade.
The 90s, the era of Image Comics, and the rock and roll artist, whether or not we like to admit that or not. Also, the birth of Vertigo. I have mixed feelings about the 90s. There's stuff there that I loved, like Jeff Smith's Bone and Cerebus. I read Cerebus. I continued to read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There was some stuff that DC did that I liked, like Kingdom Come. But a lot of I kind of stayed away from from Marvel and DC at the time.
We need to address this in the 80s before we move on. We had The Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, and things like that. And Daredevil, Frank Miller on Daredevil, which great runs, but they, in Comico with the Elementals. I think the Elementals is one of the most important, influential comics that nobody seems to remember. I think there's a line between the Elementals to the Watchmen.
But then there's American Flag and Nexus.
Right. Matt Wagner's Grendel.
Yeah, these were all great things. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned those in the 80s. So, but now we're at the 90s, and
this is the era of chromium covers. This is the era of variant covers. This is the era of die cut covers and comics that were in sealed bags with all sorts of cards and shit in them. This was the gimmick era.
Right. I think the one like I said, the 70s, the 40s was idealism. The one word to describe the 90s for me is image.
Greed. That's what it is.
No, it's style over substance. Image Comics were style over substance. The gimmicks, speculate. It's all
This was the era of DC doing terrible, horrible things to their characters, maiming Aquaman, stripping Wonder Woman of her title, killing Superman, breaking Batman, killing Dr. Fate. This was the era where the X-Men were never stronger. This is the era of Jim Lee, of Todd McFarlane. This is Spawn. This is Eric Larson's Savage Dragon. This was the era of you go outside and you walk 10 steps and there's a comic book store. And then you walk across the street and there's another comic book store. And then you go down the street and there's another comic book store. This was also the era of Wizard magazine. This is the era of my father coming home with a polybag copy of The Death of Superman and going, "Hold this, Tony. In 10 years, this comic is going to pay for your college education.
Yeah.
You just watch." It was essentially the beginning of the speculator bubble, which exploded and almost tanked the industry. This is also the era where normies got involved. A lot of normies got involved in this, and the more normies there are in a hobby, the less fun it is for me. I can't speak for you, Joe.
Did the Nom come out in the 90s?
No, the Nom came out in the late 80s.
Late 80s through the 90s, yeah.
I remember I was working in the comic store, and I had a stack of I'm not even joking, it must have been 120 copies of Nom #1, but it was like third printing.
Mhm.
We had like, Vietnam vets coming in, guys who never would come in, and they were like, "Hey, you got any Nom?" I'm like, and I was like, I was like, "Are they spec?" So I was like, "This is the third printing. It's not. No, we just want the comic." I was like, "Okay, that's cool. That's cool." They just wanted to read a war comic written by a war vet, and then I'll never forget this guy came in, and my freaking shady senses started tingling. He came in with this kid, and he goes, "What?" Because I was bagging and boarding them. And he goes, "What's this?" I go, "It's Nom #1." And his eyes went up. He goes, "How much?" I'm like, "Cover price." Cover price. It's the third print. The first print was like $10 or something like that back in whatever. And they went back and they huddled. It was like Dracula and Frankenstein. This guy's a rube. He doesn't. They bought the whole stack. And I just remember like something told me not to tell them it was third printing. And they bought the whole stack of 120. They didn't even wait for me to bag and board it. They left like, and they gave me a look like sucker. And then I told Larry, and Larry was like, "Yeah, speculators." I was like, "I didn't tell him it was third printing." He goes, Good. So they put a big stack of worthless comics, and then he just ordered like another 120 of, you know what I mean? But I'll never forget those guys. Like I like to think that like 4 months later, they were like, "These are worthless."
Now, there were some good things about it. Valiant Comics, especially back when Jim Shooter was running it. Very, very good, very, very interesting experimental universe. I think that's what he would have done with his new universe at Marvel.
I think so.
Unfortunately, like Jim Shooter had that tendency of pissing off the wrong people and getting fired.
The company was stolen from them. There's a whole, like, you could write a book about it, and he was backstabbed by Bob Layton. It's like some of it's his, like John talked to him about it, and there's an 8 hour. You really want to know what Jim Shooter, and I talked to him in person before 2 years ago for 2.5 hours about all sorts of different things at Heroes Con at the bar. But there's John's great interview with Jim Shooter. And on top of that, there was a 7.5 interview with Jim Shooter by Alex Grand.
Mhm.
And you can't listen to it all at once. They do 7 hours, they do like 6 hours, and then do another hour and a half later as a follow-up. And he just says all from his side, but you can learn a whole lot about what controversies he went through. But the most important thing about the 90s is that I got to do comics in the 90s. So screw all you 90s people who hate them. I got to ink this one comic and ink this comic and then get this one published. And I'm in the comics.org because of it.
Nice.
And then publish my own comics. So screw the 90s were the best.
All right, Marcus. All right, man. That's cool.
Actually, yeah, they were the worst. But I got to do all that because every crazy person wanted to do comics.
Now, on top of that, you had Vertigo. Vertigo, the castle that Neil Gaiman reigned, and that you had the second British invasion. Neil Gaiman, Pete Milligan, you had Garth Ennis. You have what was the guy that did Starman?
Oh, James Robinson.
Yeah, James Robinson. The Preacher. I mean, what can I say? Sandman. I was never a fan, but they were successful.
Vertigo was basically why can't I think of it? Epic Comics.
Pretty much.
Epic Comics was the same deal. It was creator owned, although like it was weird because DC owned Sandman, but like they made like a sweetheart deal with Neil Gaiman, so
the famous sweetheart deals, yeah.
And now that character is poisoned. Nobody in DC is going to touch Sandman, or because
good. Let it. I mean, Neil Gaiman will never go to jail, but let it hit him in the pocketbooks where it'll hurt him. Anyways, then you had companies like CrossGen, You had really, really good stuff like
Kesha is born in the 2000s, though, isn't it?
Mhm. And then that was the zenith of Dark Horse. Dark Horse was never more powerful, gentlemen. You had the licenses. You had Terminator, Predator. You had Indiana Jones. You had Star Wars. At the time, the brand of brands. You had interesting things like The Mask and Barbed Wire, which was a weird character that got a movie, which is stupid. But you had that. So you had Hellboy. You had Mike Allred's Madman.
Well,
So you
they had the legend. They had the
Mhm.
legend imprint Hellboy and Next
And then-
Man and Monkey Man and O'Brien.
And then you had the weird experimental, weird shit like Milestone Media from DC, which essentially black versions of regular superheroes. The only thing that was worthwhile about it, outside of the Dennis Cohen art and the Dwayne McDuffie stories, was the character called Static,
Static, yeah.
which became a breakout character.
Static Shock.
I like the character. Yeah, and then outside of that, you had the speculator boom and bust, which almost killed the industry for the second time.
Well, you also had you're leaving out the most defining part of the '90s, because all of the artists left Marvel and DC and formed Image Comics.
That's what I said, John. The rock and roll comic, the rock and roll comic artist. You had Jim
And
Lee.
they formed a whole company with artists and no writers.
Yeah.
And they were so successful. Like I heard rumors like this was like, mid '90s, that guys who were inking comics were making like $100,000 a year.
It's true. Yeah.
And it kind of killed, and me. I mean, if I was 21 years old and I was making $250,000 a year, my work ethic would be in the toilet. I'd be partying, especially at that age. So I don't blame them. Like but like, at the same time, if Sal Buscema or John Buscema was making $250,000 a year, these guys would make more comics. You know what I mean? They had that old school mentality of like, oh, this isn't going to last forever. We got to strike while they are. But
I still remember going to my local 7-Eleven and picking up Spawn #1 off the stands. I'm like, yes, Todd McFarlane. I open it up. Every other page is a double page spread. And the story made no frigging sense, but I bought it.
Spider-Man made no sense either.
Cool,
I always say that to people. When did you give up on Spawn? I think I made it about 11 issues.
Yeah, I took it to about 20. And then I was like, yeah, this ain't for me, man. It just ain't for me.
So I showed this comic before. So this guy was from the Bronx, right? Lionel Torres. And this is issue number 2. Issue number 1, he made his own all by himself and his wife, and he lettered it. And the lettering was so bad, I insisted on lettering this by hand because I wasn't going to be in a comic in which my lettering isn't that great, but it was more better than his. But he made money on this. He would take Prismacolor markers, and then this is the kind of artwork you get. Like it's imagey stuff. But the shops didn't know what was going to hit. So he made money on the first issue. Everybody made money on their first issue.
Right.
And then by the third issue, this is the second issue.
You couldn't give stuff away.
Black and white. And that's the end. He moved to North Carolina or something.
The other thing I remember about that is ash cans. Does anybody remember
Yes.
black and white ash cans? Like, oh man, how many versions, John, of Gen 13 were there? Because I remember I lost count at like 60. There was like a version like this and a version like that, and a black and white version.
And the 90s were the time where, and if you follow me on X, it says when I kind of stopped buying. I could not buy every comic I wanted to buy. I would be on a pull list, and I hated pull lists because what would happen was I'd be on a pull list and I realized I never took that book out. I'd have stacks of comics on the pull list that I didn't want to read because I only bought from the ones I wanted to read. And my wife would go for my birthday and buy these comics, like stacks of them, because only like a year's worth of them is any good. The rest of them were awful. And I couldn't buy, like, oh, how come you didn't buy all the Todd McFarlane? I couldn't afford to buy all the Todd McFarlane comics and all the and all that, and they never came out. Well, his came out, but the other ones never came out anyway.
I have a weirdo friend whose own thing is to collect every single issue of Spawn #1. He's got them in Hebrew, in Spanish,
In Hebrew,
in
nice.
German, in Japanese, in Chinese. Like, that's his thing. He's a Spawn #1 fanatic. It's weird. But yeah, overproduced, a glut on the market. If you have a comic book shop that still has a quarter, a dollar bin, 95% of those are Image comics. They're
Yeah,
terrible.
I would say that.
Yeah,
There was good Image comics.
I remember.
Oh,
I remember it was like I was a comic book. I was working at the comic store. I was like, I'm getting every Image comic, and I was just like, I don't like these. And it took me a long time before I could be like, I'm not getting Image anymore. Like, and it was funny because like my friends like, oh, you still were getting Image comics, you know? I was like, oh, I was the last holdout. They were awful.
Now, some of them I have to give credit where credit is due. Sam Keith's The Max is brilliant. It's a brilliant piece of work. Dale Keon's Pit was really good.
It was okay. I challenge you to read that right now and follow it. It's a disjointed mess.
Really, he's still making them?
No. Go read it now. Go reread it.
I just like the art. I just like the way he would draw the character. They were more.
He's a phenomenal artist. Most of these guys were phenomenal artists, except for Rob Liefeld.
Now, I like Eric Larson's Savage Dragon because
the early Savage Dragons is really good.
It reeked of Marvel. It was a Marvel book, but now it's become a porno book. I cannot even.
First 100 issues of Savage Dragon are great comics.
Yes.
I'll say Gen 13 was a good comic because it had a real writer for the most part, but everything like Spawn, I was like, what? Every issue, I was like, what's going on? This makes no sense.
He's become a better toy maker than he was a comic book maker.
And I like Todd McFarlane. Don't get me. I also like Rob Liefeld. He's very likable.
I don't really like Rob Liefeld, but I feel him like he rubs me the wrong way.
But
now we're forgetting, gentlemen.
A terrible artist. I see his.
I liked Jerry Ordway's Wildstar. That was a good comic.
That was good.
Like they started getting the second generation of artists, and they were trying to work on their own thing because the Image thing is kind of like you're producing your own comic, and they're doing the legwork and the publishing. So I like Wildstar a lot. There were a couple. I started following artists more than characters because I couldn't afford to buy all the comics like I used to do.
Now we need to talk about when all of these guys left Marvel and DC. How bad was Marvel and DC? Oh my God! They had crap comics like Force Works. Oh my God!
Force Works, yeah, it was pretty bad.
Now you had the final death of Eclipse Comics. They died, unfortunately. That was Mirage still limped along. Comico was pretty much dead at that time. Now you have Batman the Animated Series, the series that saved Batman a second time, that reinvigorated it. And in that series, you have the first appearance of a character that I used to love, and now I cannot stand, Harley Quinn. Yep. Coincidentally, the 90s, you also had the debut of another character I used to like but cannot stand, Deadpool.
I never liked Deadpool.
Yeah, so you have those two things. A brilliant Superman the Animated Series. Brilliant Superman the Animated Series there. You have a series of really decent comic book movies. The live-action Mask. You have The Crow. A wonderful, and I know you. I don't want to harp on you about it. You really ought to watch the Crow.
I remember I've seen the Crow movie. I saw it.
Great movie. Yeah, and Marcus, who held the license for Star Trek?
It was DC, I think. DC.
In the 90s, though. I mean, for Deep Space Nine and stuff. Who
Malibu.
Malibu. What happened to that company? It got absorbed by Marvel. You know,
they made some great comics, but it's just like everything else. You know, there's a big market, and the crash killed them. Sludge was good. There were a lot of good comics out of there.
And you also had the birth of Alex Ross. Alex Ross, who started in Now Comics illustrating Terminator, He reinvented himself with the Marvels limited series, and then reinvented himself again with Kingdom Come. So yeah, you have that.
And he wrote most of Kingdom Come, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I don't doubt it. Kurt Busiek's Astro City, and my favorite run of the Flash next to the original John Broome, Carmine Infantino run by Mark Waid.
Yeah.
Who apparently always liked the way he was.
I just want to say one last thing about Rob Liefeld, and then I'll stop. How is it possible that this guy never got any better? His art.
Oh, I heard about that. There is a reason.
I saw his new covers for his new Youngblood. They are just as bad. How is this guy not?
He never wanted to get better because he didn't want to lose what made him popular. He knew. He knew that he could. He knew that he could get better, but he decided. But I have heard this. This is a rumor that he had said that I don't really want to get better because I don't want to lose what made me popular.
I don't know.
I just read
well, I'm not giving it as an excuse. I'm just telling you what I heard.
I just don't.
I'd forgotten about that. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first one, great film. The Rocketeer, even better film. The Phantom, the Shadow film. You had this weird resurgence of pulps in the early to mid '90s, which was
Tracy.
Yeah, the Dick Tracy.
I like a weird film.
Dick Tracy, yes, in the early '90s. Yeah, I forgot about that.
If you look at Liefeld's Malibu work, he draws just like Perez. I got to check that out then because you got me curious, but I just don't like his.
Well, he tried to draw like Perez. I also was on a stream with somebody once who used to ink him, and he said Rob draws against his influences. He has all the same influences I do, Buscema and Kirby and Perez and Byrne and all those guys, but he just doesn't try to draw like them. I don't know what it is. It's a zeitgeist thing, but those are the things I've heard about him.
So now we'll get to the 2000s. You know, I will say that Image at this point was bizarrely really good.
Yeah, Valentino was running
it. I guess they realized, man, we need art. We need writers. They opened it up to like publishing other people's work. It wasn't just like the founders. And Image got really good. CrossGen was. I have yet to read. I've just picked up CrossGen comics because I purposely avoided because this was the brokest I've ever been. I'm in college now. I just graduated college. I don't have a job yet, and so CrossGen is it. And I was just like, I'm not looking at it. I'm not looking at it. I didn't buy a CrossGen comic until like 5-6 years ago, and then I just started buying full runs. I have not read a bad CrossGen comic. I am amazed that comic company folded because it was just quality.
Well, they didn't sell.
Right.
Like Chuck talks about it.
Yeah.
And all the other ones say the same thing as Chuck. They knew. Even going in, the artists knew this was only going to last a couple of years, but they got a couple of years of 9 to 5. I could do 1 or 2 pages a day. I could do it whenever I want, as long as they hit their deadlines for Mark Alessi.
Right. And they had medical benefits. They had they had everything. Mark Alessi had good intentions, but like,
no, it was a great idea. Could you imagine? I sent stuff there.
It's so good.
Now the 2000s, that's when DC pre-New 52. That's when DC jumped the shark for me. That's when I stopped reading. You have stuff like Identity Crisis. You have stuff like trying to remember.
Some of the comics looked good though. They were terrible. The rise of Bendis and the wokesters, and then the Bendis is super woke, and the Buffy the Vampire Slayer dialogue, the Joss Whedon dialogue, that the semi-ironic, everybody's funny, quippy dialogue. Yeah, I did read it because I took got stuff out of the library and read the trades.
But I will say the Marvel and DC at this period, from 2000 to 2010. The art was outstanding. The art was
I was going to say, yep.
Yeah, art was really good, but like you said, Identity Crisis. This to me, and this was the beginning of had you told me in 2001 that I would be done collecting Marvel in 2015, I'd be like, you're crazy. But there was just like little things like disregarding continuity. Like
For me, it was the mean-spiritedness of it. You don't have to be mean-spirited.
I think DC fared a little better with Green Lantern. They had a great run of that with Jeff Johns.
Now, here's where Marvel starts, in my opinion, starts to focus more on the IP aspect of it and less on the comic books. That's where you have the rise of the MCU with Iron Man #1, I guess it was in 2008, with Robert Downey Jr., the first one. I can't really tell you now for Marvel. I quit Marvel right around the time that Grant Morrison took over X-Men because I was like, I just don't like this. I didn't like the art. I didn't like the style.
I'm not a big fan of that either.
And I quit DC right around the time of the New 52. So this is sort of where I step off, gentlemen, and I let you guys do your thing. Because that's sort of, I mean, I still read stuff like I finished off Cerebus, but I just sort of stopped really reading too much. And that's when I began to look at the back, look at the past more than anything of the
Phase 1 of the MCU was good. It's now the MCU, it's awful. Iron Man was with Captain. All those first movies were good, even the #2s and #3s. But the company did not capitalize on the movies because when you go to Iron Man and Avengers and Thor and Captain America, and they went in to see it, Iron Man was a teenage black girl, Thor was Jane Foster, Cap was Falcon, and the retailers complained about it. Hey, we can't sell these. They look great, Stu. Remember, the great artists were drawing them, but we can't sell these. They want the ones in the movies, which were the Ultimates. The Ultimates were another problem, but and they were called racists and bigots, and that's the end. That's the end of this is what we have now.
And also we forgot this was the time period where they started canceling and restarting everything with #1s.
Everything with #1s.
Oh,
yeah,
my God,
everything.
that bothered me.
And then I tried to read in online and in Captain America, and I had to go online and find out what order it was because #1. Captain America never had a #1 except in the 40s. 1941 was the only Captain America #1 because it was Captain America 100 when Tales of Suspense ended. But when I did some research on it back in 2008, 2009, 2000, he had 7 #1s, 8 #1s, 9 #1s. Now forget it.
Yeah, I got to get back to it of scanning my collection. I know you like those videos. I do.
I don't know why. It's like ASMR,
I got to get back to that. But man, putting those Captain Americas in order, because it'll start at #1, and then all of a sudden it's 612. But the issue before that was 11.
Yeah, and it's the Ed Brubaker stuff. It's good Captain. It's not bad comics. It's just really confusing on what order they're in.
Yeah,
Brubaker was good.
I'm reading Fantastic Four, and then it ends at 404. It starts over again. Oh my God, that was like a physical wound to me. I was like, you can't do this. You can't.
Criminal by Ed Brubaker was good, and of course you have Walking Dead.
Yep.
Save comics. Why is there a comics industry? Because it was Walking Dead and Invincible. I'm not a big Invincible fan, but I liked Walking Dead.
I like it. The only thing by Kirkman I just can't stand is his Battle Pope. It's just
to me that's his earliest thing, right?
That's like edgy freshman college guys. What if all the religious guys were like perverts and degenerates? Oh, look at Jesus, he's this hot smoking idiot. The Pope wants to. It's like, oh yeah, every college age 18, the same thing. Make Battle Muhammad. There you go. I'll give you some respect if you could do that. But what year was the New 52?
What was it,
2008? No, 2010 or 2010, 2011, something like that.
So that was the end of me. So I can't really, like the next. I could just lump the rest of it. It was me buying back issues in independent comics.
Me too.
There was some art, and they gave a lot of work to a lot of good artists on a New 52, but it was a mess. It's something that
the art was fine. The New 52 art was fine. My problem with
it's the writing.
I didn't like Jim Lee's redesigns. It just had useless.
No, I don't like them either.
It was just silly, and to me it made it think it doesn't matter because I was just like, I'm not going to invest myself starting all over again, and then in 5 years they're just going to restart again.
Well,
I can't ever get back to DC because it just feels like every 5 years they reboot.
every jumping on point is a jumping off point.
Right. So that was the end. So after talking almost 3 hours, so next week we know we're going to do the Mount Rushmore. So
right.
So we'll start with Tony. And everybody in the chat, start telling us what your favorite decade is. So Tony, what's your favorite decade?
Well, the golden age, man. The golden age in the 50s, the 40s and the 50s, late 30s.
Lord, old soul, man. Let me see. Do you got any gray hair under that hat? I mean, that, like I said, the 50s to me, I just don't know enough about it. And what I do know, I didn't really like. But
John, have you ever read Darwin Cook's New Frontier?
Yeah.
That basically encapsulates the coolness of the atom age of the 50s.
Yeah. I'm not ignorant. I know that there was some good 50s comics. You know, like I just read those Matt Baker Canteen Cates, and I absolutely loved them. And those were from like 1949 to 1953. So I know that there's good comics. I just that's why I bought all of those compilations of Atlas comics. They made it easy for me to read some 50s comics. We got the 60s and the 40s. I'm really glad that the 40s are getting some representation here because the golden, and I know that the golden age that filtered to me is probably the cream of the crop because the shit didn't get to my eyes at this point, you know, when I started looking for that stuff. But so we got Art. He says the 80s. I'm with the 80s, unabashedly the 80s for so many reasons. Great stories. I was 16 to 19. You know what I mean? I was 16 to 20. Worked in the comic book store. You know what I mean? It was just a fun time. You know. So of course the 80s for me. You know, of course. Marcus, what do you say?
I probably. Oh, geez, it's harder for me because I really go through a lot of them. There's the 60s for the explosion of Marvel, and then I grew up. I was a kid in the 70s. Like that's when I read a lot of comics. So I'd probably say the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
You know, to me, it's all merged into one in a lot of ways. I would probably say the 80s when you start with the explosion of all the different comics you could buy and the different creators, you know, that start maybe from the late, really like 78 to 88, you know.
Yeah,
89, 90 starts all that craziness.
It's 80s, no contest for me. And then secondary, it's got to be the 60s because that's just like the foundation of all the stuff that made me like comics. Which and then third would be the 70s because I was a kid learning to read, and those comics were some of my earliest experiences with comics. But you know, the 50s, I can't comment on. The 90s were so hit or miss. The early 2000s were really good. And then towards the end, I was done with comics. You know, Marcus is correct. The 80s. Yeah, it seems like the 80s win.
Cool.
I think a lot of people that are watching us, that's when they read most of the comics. That's the age of your favorite group, your favorite era is usually when you started reading comics, when you got to the magic of comics.
Yeah, well, I started in the 75, you know, but like it's like I was working in the comic store, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was just so, and then all that the excitement of the black and white boom and everything. Yeah, it's the 80s, you know, without a doubt. But I can't keep my eyes open anymore, and I'm sure Marcus is about to die. So we'll start with Tony, and we'll say goodbyes. Everybody in the chat, thank you. This was a long one. So Tony, anything you want to say before we go?
Yeah, buy Heroic Tales. Watch Marcus draw stuff.
Yep. And go to the Frontier Diner and enjoy a Frontier burrito for me.
Will do. Will do.
We got to get teleportation working so you can send me those. I miss the food in Albuquerque. Marcus, anything you want to say?
I'm on the studio tomorrow at 7. We have Saboteur Comics on. I have to research what his comic's about, but he has a Kickstarter, I think.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I don't know. I guess we're drawing his comic. His comic doesn't seem to, from what I looked at, a lot of characters. It's more of a story-ish type of thing, like
What's the name of the comic? Saboteur comic?
Saboteur Comics.
Oh, okay.
I think it's called Tommy or something. It's a kind of, I think it's about kidnapping girls or something.
Oh God.
Like it's a horror-ish comic.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how I kind of felt about it. But
Heroic Tales 2 is still live on Fund My Comic. You can go to Fund My Comic, type in Heroic Tales. You can get if you go to the Heroic Tales 2 page, you can get everything that I have to offer. We're working on a permanent store. I got one definite story that's already done, ready to come out, but somebody else is handling it. And Patriarch #1, sooner rather than later. That's all. I'm actually going to be done with it before the campaign because that gives me options. We'll leave it at that. And I'm getting sleepy, and I can't think of words to say anymore. So I get
okay. Night, everybody. It's always fun.
Bye, kids, and thanks, Marcus. I know you're dying. Bye, bye.
I'm fine.
Goodbye, kids.